Hello, folks.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, welcome.
Happy Wednesday.
Happy hump day to everyone.
We made it. We made it this far
We did.
in the week.
We
So far,
did.
so good.
Halfway through the week.
Mm-hmm.
We're hanging in there.
I'm looking scruffy. I'm going to have to shave one day.
You don't look in the mirrors, but you see yourself on the
Yeah,
podcast screen
I
here.
haven't looked in a mirror in a long time, but, I still have a face. That's good. It's just covered in fur.
It just makes you look grungy
Yeah.
and cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going for.
Yeah. But hope everybody is having a good week so far.
Yeah. Is everyone doing good? Hi, Link. Hello.
Hello,
Nice to see you
Link.
coming in with so much excitement
Yes.
today.
Yay. And it's
appreciate
highlighted, too, to make
Yeah,
sure that we
and
see
it's
the
highlighted.
excitement. I'm seeing it. I'm feeling it. It's great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. No, I'm very glad that you guys are here. Kirby's here. All right. We got some
Yeah.
eggplant starting it off right.
Yeah.
Starting it off
Definitely.
correctly.
Uh.
So, yeah, tonight we are going to kind of piggyback on the Abandoned series that we have been doing over the past month. But we're going to shift focus a little bit on this one. We are going to cover abandoned asylums and mental health institutions.
Ooh.
But we are going to more so focus on the history of the mental health industry and how what we come to know as like insane asylums became to be and what they have transitioned out of. So we're not really going to be talking about current mental health institutions right now, but we're going to be talking about the history of how these things started and some of the extremely questionable practices that were done at these establishments.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the treatments are not treatments anymore. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. Some of them get a little intense, hence graphic warning. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, we went ahead and put the graphic content on because just the subject matter is going to be, a bit disturbing, talking about mental health and mistreatment in the systems and such.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even, at one point, there is some old video of some of these treatments actually in action.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be very, very interesting. This is definitely a very intriguing subject matter to cover. So I'm really excited to delve deeper into this because it's absolutely fascinating how much has changed and the things that people thought were appropriate at the time that no longer are appropriate.
It's true.
So fantastic. So we are going to kind of get into that here shortly.
Yeah, definitely.
So, okay, just to sidetrack out real quick, Kirby is saying that the interview went well today, spent 6 hours at the station, and you love it there. That's amazing.
Awesome.
And then
Yeah,
you will hear back early next week. That's so cool.
Sick.
Awesome.
Today was your long-ass interview, huh? Good.
Yes,
Glad
I
that
am
went well.
so happy that went well for you. That is fantastic.
No. Everyone you met was nice? You liked everybody? Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, that's
Good.
cool. You'll hear back early next week.
Good.
Awesome. That's rad.
That is very good news. We
Good.
needed good news
Yeah.
here on Inspired Mystery Podcast. So great. This is
True.
good friggin' news. Hi,
Yeah.
Princess.
Hi, Princess.
Hello, my friend.
Nice to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Cool. So yeah, I'm really excited about this episode today. Actually, I think it's going to be really, really neat and informative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole mental health situation of the past is interesting, to say the least. Like, super dark. It's heavy stuff, man. Like, it seems weird that these are things that we actually did to people for menial reasons. Like, some of the reasons, just because someone was gay. We were like, oh, you got a mental disability. Like, we have to cure you with torture, essentially. And it's crazy that we have gone down those paths as humans and
You're so right.
just treated people like that. Like, I mean, I guess, trial and error, we have to learn somehow, but some of that just seemed like common sense. That's a weird one.
Now that you mentioned that, actually, I was just going to look up a list of reasons why people were institutionalized back in the day. I guess I should have thought about that before, but that just made me think of like, oh yeah, there's like some crazy reasons.
Yeah.
That they would throw people.
What did they used to call, like, for women, instead of having PMS, they call it like
melancholia.
Melancholia, and then there was like a something madness too, like a.
Oh, like the menstrual...
Like female madness or something like that. But it's hormones. And every woman has dealt with some kind of version of that. Well, I can't see every woman.
Not every woman.
But, large populations of women have dealt with some kind of change due to the hormones and chemicals coursing through their bodies. And they were just like, oh, it's got to be a disability of some kind. Like, we should lobotomize them or like give them shock treatment. It's weird.
Okay, I just pulled up this crazy list here.
Okay.
Guys, ready about this shit? It's crazy. Okay.
Thanks. I think our camera's being weird again. It's a little slow. We're doing okay. We're good. Okay.
Okay. So here are some of the reasons for admission from 1864 to 1889. So we're not going to read every single one, but we're going to just kind of scroll through and pick out.
Kicked in the head by a horse.
Kicked in the head by a horse.
That one, I accept that one.
Wow.
Because you could be messed up with that.
Well, hello, Sandy Lou. Welcome.
Oh, hi, Sandy Lou. Hello. Ill treatment by husband.
Wow, so if the husband's treating them shitty, then they can just be committed for that? Cool.
That doesn't make any sense.
No.
Imaginary female trouble is one of them. Imaginary female trouble.
Yeah. And then business trouble. If you have business trouble, you could be admitted. Okay.
Dropsy. I don't even know what dropsy is. What is dropsy?
Egotism. Wow. Because if egotism was a thing, most people would be in an asylum right now. My goodness.
Dropsy is an old term for the swelling of soft tissues due to the accumulation of excess water.
Okay, so if you have a little bit water retention and your skin sags?
Yes, some kind of water retention. So it used to all be kind of categorized as the same, but nowadays we split it up based on the specific cause. Like a person might have edema due to congestive heart failure or something.
Okay.
It's not just, I guess dropsy was just an overall term.
Look at these two put together. This doesn't make sense. Jealousy and religion.
Oh,
what do you mean? What do you mean jealousy and religion? What do you mean?
If you got both of those.
What do you mean? Okay.
Laziness. Marriage of son.
Marriage of son.
Your son got married, you're committed. We're committing you.
Oh, sexual abuse. If you got sexually abused, you're screwed. That's horrible. Exposure and quackery.
Not quackery.
Exposure and army. Really? So if you were in the army, obviously. That was intense. So you should be committed.
Masturbation for 30 years.
That's a long time.
If you've been masturbating for 30 years, that's a long time to be masturbating. You should stop doing that. You're gonna rub it raw, man.
Yeah. Medicine to prevent conception. If you were on birth control,
you could be committed. Yeah. Okay.
Oh my God.
Novel reading. Novel reading.
The war. It just says the war. It doesn't say anything else. The war. Time of life.
Time of life.
You're 43. That time of life is completely inappropriate.
Yep.
You're out.
I hope you had the time of your life.
Fighting fire?
Oh, yeah.
Fighting a fire.
Yep. You're committed.
What do you mean?
Reading books.
Yeah. What do you mean fighting fire?
Yeah, I don't know why.
Jesus Christ,
Maybe
man.
if you're fighting fire with fire.
Shooting of daughter?
Yeah. Yeah, if you shoot your daughter, you should be committed. Parents were cousins. Yeah, well.
Oh,
that seems like
man.
They should be committed, not you.
Wow.
Overstudy of religion.
Oh, really? Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
Tobacco and masturbation.
Superstition. Just superstition.
Ooh. Superstition.
Oh, like, oh, you know what? Black cat crossed my path. Better watch out. Oh, committed.
Oh, you're committed.
You're committed. Smallpox. Don't you dare get smallpox because you're fucked.
Yeah, don't do that.
And don't eat snuff for 2 years.
Yeah,
Snuff
no.
eating for 2 years. What is that? Like tobacco snuff?
Guess.
If you use tobacco snuff
That's all I...
for 2 years,
Yeah.
what the fuck? Spinal irritation. Yo, I'd be so committed forever since I was like 5,
Yeah.
dude. What the hell?
Gunshot wound. Yeah.
Gathering in the head.
Yeah, a gathering in the head.
What does that mean? Like
That's gotta be
voices
like
in the head?
voices, yeah. I like the tobacco and masturbation as one thing. Tobacco and masturbation. If you are smoking and masturbating, that's crazy. You're crazy. We gotta commit you.
Oh my god.
Asthma.
Okay.
Asthma.
Yeah, they're putting weird things together. Fever and loss of lawsuit. Like, what does that mean?
Okay. I got sued and now I have a fever.
Like, if you have a fever, you're okay. If you lost a lawsuit, you're okay. But if you have a fever at the same time that you've lost a lawsuit, committed.
Sounds like a superstition.
Okay. But the political excitement, you can't even be like, rah, 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 whatever.
3/4 of this country would be committed right now.
Yeah, and then look, political excitement and religious enthusiasm. That's like all the far right now. Big time. Okay. I thought it said fish. It says fits and desertion. I was like, fish? Really? Fish? Okay. I mean, I guess at this point, not too surprised. Hard study. Rumor of husband murder. Not actual husband murder, but rumor,
Just rumor.
of...
Salvation Army? What? If you're shopping at the Salvation Army, you should be committed. Bad whiskey.
That's a good band
Yeah.
name right there.
Bad whiskey. I would totally go see Bad Whiskey.
Oh, my God.
That's a folk punk band. Hardcore.
Yeah, seduction and disappointment. Kirby's like, oh, yeah, man, I seduced this guy, and it was very disappointing. Like, committed.
Yeah.
You're
So
committed.
not
You're
good.
committed.
Brain fever. I got the brain pain, Pops.
Carbonic acid gas?
Oh.
Wait. What?
Just like gas from eating carbs?
I
that
know,
what-
eating acid.
Eating acid. Acid gives me gas. You should be
Carbonic
committed.
acid gas. How that applies to an individual being committed, I don't know. Is it like a huffing gas? I don't
know
know.
what that is. Carbonic acid is a heavy gas. It
Carbon
extinguishes fire and destroys all animal life. If an animal attempts to breathe it pure, there is spasmodic closure of the...
It's carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
Okay. So don't have carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
Or you're committed. Okay.
Of the spasmodic closure of the glottis.
Okay. Fell from a horse in the war. God help you if you fell from a horse in the war.
Oh, I fell off my horse.
Committed.
Committed. Damn it.
Scarlatina.
False confinement. Aren't most of these resulting in false confinement? Like, isn't that's what all these are? Bad whiskey. If you get committed because of bad whiskey, you have been falsely confined. Therefore, you should be committed. So if you get committed, you should be committed. Hi, Steve.
That's crazy. Hi, Steve.
We're looking at reasons people were committed to mental institutions back in the day. And if you look right up over here, you'll see bad whiskey. And that's the number one reason to be committed, really.
Asthma, if you have asthma, committed.
Yeah.
Grief, if you're sad about something, committed.
Yeah.
Committed. Female disease. What do I know what that means?
Just female disease.
Deranged masturbation. Ooh.
Yeah. That's
Desertion by husband. If your husband leaves you, you could be committed.
yeah. Well. Yeah.
What's scarlatina? Will you look up scarlatina?
Scarlatina. Probably like a rosening of the cheeks.
Because that's a nice word. I like that word. But it probably means something not good.
Scarlet fever.
Oh, okay. Okay, and Sarah wants to know what dissipation of nerves is.
Dissipation of nerves.
Yeah, I don't know what that means either. Feebleness of intellect if you're a little goofy. Come in. Come in. Come in. Wow, this is like craziness. Bloody flux. I don't know what that is either. We're going to find that out.
Ooh.
Bloody flux. I'm going to look that one up.
Dissipation of Nerves was a painting by Beth Walls. I learned that much so far.
Ew. Bloody diarrhea.
Oh, that makes
They
sense.
will commit you if you have bloody diarrhea. Oh my god. Dysentery is bloody flux. Okay. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a good reason to be committed for your life to a establishment where you are mistreated. This is just politics in general. Politics.
Just politics.
There's political excitement, but then they're like, you know what? Politics in general. Anything having to do with politics. You know what? We're going to add religious enthusiasm onto it, too. Don't have opinions, basically. Don't have opinions.
Yeah.
Don't get sick. This is what I'm learning. Don't have opinions. Don't get sick. Don't be a loser, because if you lose like a lawsuit or something, or your business is struggling, you're totally fucked. Don't be superstitious. Don't eat snuff or masturbate a whole bunch. Don't go to war. It clearly says in here, don't go to war, because you could fall off a horse, you get kicked in the head by a horse. You could, there's a bunch of different things that were like, hey, in war. Mm-hmm. Just war. It says the war, you know? Like, war. I don't know. So don't go to war.
Uterine derangement. Venereal excesses.
Venereal excesses. I don't even know what that would mean.
Nope.
Novel read. Yeah, don't read.
Don't
reading. Think.
Don't be reading.
Don't let your son get married, obviously.
Don't let your parents be cousins.
Nope. Don't be lazy. Or ever go get imprisoned. Or lead an immoral life. Don't even have imaginary female trouble. It's not even real female trouble. Don't even have imaginary versions of it.
Nope.
So
this person was trying to figure out what dissipation of nerves means as well. And they found pretty much the same thing I did, that there's a number of interesting definitions. Breaking up and scattering by dispersion, or wasting by misuse, or a process by which energy is used or lost without accomplishing useful work. So, I guess like a scattered brain type of thing, like just being scatterbrained.
I don't know.
It's not really a term anymore, so there's no like definition for it.
Interesting. What do you think excitement as officer means?
Excitement as officer. So if you're just like stoked to be arresting people? I don't know. Yeah, princess. Exposure and quackery.
Right? Quackery.
No quackery. If you're exposing yourself. Quackery seems fine.
That's crazy. What a crazy thing. Nymphomania.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah, I don't know. But I still don't understand why they put a bunch of them together. Like tobacco and masturbation. Like what? Why are these two things together?
I don't know. A lot of masturbation things on there.
There's a lot.
If you're combining it with different things like tobacco, it's not good.
Some of the most confusing ones to me of this list, which there's a lot.
Yeah, most of these.
I would say bad whiskey and carbon dioxide.
Yeah, and fighting fire.
And fighting fire.
Fighting fire is a weird one.
I'm super confused. Some of the things, obviously, I don't agree. I don't agree with any of these, but there's ones that I could understand back in those times why they might attribute certain things like nymphomania or whatever. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with that. But back in the day, I could understand maybe them not getting it, you know? But like asthma?
Asthma.
You fuckers, that's like so mean.
Shooting of daughter. All right, if you shoot your daughter, acceptable.
Yeah, for sure. But
well, I don't know. What did she do? Maybe she shot
some
first.
of it, laziness. You're a little lazy.
Just a little lazy.
You're just a little lazy.
Freaking lazy.
And apparently that's reason enough to be committed.
Yeah.
I do not get it. So that was very interesting.
Yeah.
But the worst was like deserted by husband. Deserted by husband, so therefore
Yeah, you gotta be
you
crazy.
get committed. Like
He had to desert you for a reason.
My favorite is kicked in the head by a horse, though. That's the funniest one I think of all the entire thing.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So cool. All right, we learned about that. So these are some of the reasons before that's a perfect way to start it.
Yeah.
So before going into all the shit about people that are committed, keep in mind throughout everything we're going to talk about tonight that not everybody in these facilities needed to be in these facilities whatsoever. Some people obviously had mental health dilemmas, serious stuff, and I can understand families not knowing how to care for people that had severe mental illness.
Yeah.
I get that, but some of it, it's like politics, you know? Oh, you just sat around talking about politics, and now you're in jail, in this scary hospital jail, like, for a long time. So that, I think it's good to recognize that these were not all people that needed to be there. There was so many people like, oh, I just fought this fire. The house is on fire. Fought the fire. You're going down. So we're going to see what's next on the agenda here. Where to start?
Sarah, I mean, you gotta have some tobacco after finishing. It's true. And actually, through the 60s, doctors would have recommended it.
That's true. Well, yeah, men could get women committed for various reasons. That's that whole thing we just read, was the reasons that women could be committed by men.
Yeah,
like,
but just referring to how many of those are specifically for women. And
yeah. Oh, yeah. I guarantee
women
you
could be
that
for most anything.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's fucked up. It's so fucked up that the men could just be like, oh, she, has a bad day. Grief. Yeah. You're going out, whatever. Like, there's so many reasons why any man could just.
She gave me bad whiskey.
Bad whiskey, man.
Yep.
Oh, it's so fucked up. It's so horribly, terribly fucked up.
Not good.
But that's just like that's the biggest list of reasons why people could call someone out and get committed. It's ridiculous. It's so disappointing that that's actually what is going on.
It's pretty sad.
Yes.
Especially with what we're about to learn about what happened once people were committed.
Yes.
Well, that's a bummer.
Oh my God. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to... Oh, I can't even read that. It's the smallest text ever. On my phone, it was like, do you want to convert it to, like, phone version? And I was like, yeah. And now it's like, I cannot even fucking read that shit. That sucks. There's this... Here, I just want you guys to see. Just want you to see. Look at how small this... I am way too old to be able to fucking read that shit. Unfortunately, that's crazy.
Yeah, why doesn't it all fit onto the page?
I don't know, but I have to zoom. I have to do an annoying zooming thing. I'm just gonna put it on one, and I will zoom and dictate for you. Make it a little bit easier. So, this article, this talks about the early psychiatric hospitals and asylums. So this is where they started. Okay, we're making the window a little bit bigger. Thank you. The whole thing. That's much.
This website is not responsive.
No, it's not good.
It's terrible.
Okay, so the basic gist from reading this earlier, basic gist that I got is a bunch of people came over, Mayflower style and all that stuff. So they were colonizing the states. And the Quakers in the Philadelphia area were the first in the country to make an organized effort to care for the mentally ill. So they realized that there was, some people that needed help, and they weren't quite exactly sure how to do that. But they're like, okay, we have people have some issues right now, so we need to find a way to care for them. So in 1752, there was a hospital in Pennsylvania, and in the basement, they were like, okay, we'll make some rooms that we can care for the people in. And pretty much the basement had some shackles attached to the wall.
Wow.
Yep. So this was a very small region. So a small number of mentally ill patients could go to the Pennsylvania hospital and be sent to the basement and shackled. So that sounds really helpful.
Yeah.
And then within a year or two, the press for administrations required additional space. An ward was open beside the hospital. So they're like, oh, this is working out great. We need more space for this. So this is 1752. So eventually, the new Pennsylvania Hospital for the Insane, end I quote, was opened in a suburb in 1856, and it remained open under different names until 1998.
Wow. Wow, really? That's the longest anything in our country was ever open.
98.
That had to be like the oldest running business in the country, right? That's crazy.
Honestly, I don't know. That might be. That's interesting because that's pretty damn late. Yeah. But they changed the name, so obviously, they wasn't called For the Insane anymore. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that seemed like it changed names and it was open for quite a while. It's hard to believe that, like, in our lifetime that we've been able to see the complete deinstitutionalization of this entire thing. Because growing up, like, we'd always heard about, like, these mental institutions. Mm-hmm. And they're just...
Yeah, and they're kind of gone.
Not what they were before.
Yep.
Which is good and bad in different ways.
Yeah.
It's good in a lot of ways, but it's also not good in a lot of ways, too.
Yeah. At least this version of mental institutions being gone is good.
Yes. Okay, so in 1773, to deal with people who were causing problems in the community, Virginia legislature provided funds to build a small hospital in Williamsburg. So the hospital grew in size, and it remained within the historic area of the city into the mid-20th century, when a new hospital was built in a suburb, and today that is the Eastern State Hospital. So in 1792, so we're still in the 1700s when all this is starting to take shape here, the New York hospital opened a ward for curable insane patients. So in 1808, a freestanding medical facility was built nearby for the humane treatment of the mentally ill. That sounds good. I wonder what they considered humane. I don't know. Hopefully it was up to our standards. Yeah. Maybe they were making an effort to be different than the rest of them. I don't know. But in 1821, a larger facility called the Bloomdale Asylum was built in what is now the Upper West Side. So in 1894, it was moved further away to the suburb of White Plains and is currently under operation in the Payne Whitney Westchester Hospital. So it's a division of the New York Hospital Medical Center. So that is interesting. All right, then 1817. In 1817, the Asylum for the Relief of Persons Deprived of the Use of Their Reason was opened under Quaker auspices. So wait, hold on. The Asylum for the Relief of Persons Deprived of the Use of Their Reason was the name of it. It continues to serve function to this day at the Friends Hospital. 1817, private mental hospital. That was its name. That's the name they come up with.
What? That is even the acronym for that would be crazy. The acronym would be TARP-DER. TARP-DER. Yeah. The Asylum for the Relief of Persons Deprived of the Use of Their Reason. Who named that? A NASA scientist? That's crazy. That was a ridiculous name. Whoever came up with that name should have been put in the hospital.
That's crazy.
Ridiculous.
Princess, what tours? You said you went on tours. Was it a specific,
Yeah, like
one of the specific places we mentioned? Because that'd be really cool.
Yeah, like Asylum tour?
Was it a bunch in general, or was it just like a specific one here? Yeah. Okay, so 1817, now 1824, the Eastern Lunatic Asylum. That's a great name.
Yeah.
Eastern Lunatic Asylum was opened in Kensington, Kentucky. Lexington, sorry. That's Kentucky and Lexington together is Kensington. Okay. It's the first mental institution west of the Appalachian Mountains. It still operates today under the name Eastern State Hospital. There's a bunch of Eastern State hospitals, apparently.
Sure.
But by 1890, every state had built one or more publicly supported mental hospitals, which all expanded in size as the country's population increased. By the mid-20th century, the hospitals housed over 500,000 patients, but began to diminish in size as the new methods of treatment became available.
Okay.
So that is an interesting beginning of history. Started shackles in a basement.
One tour was for psychological classes, and then the later tour was for my special education classes. Totally different focuses, but we're basically the same. Interesting.
Oh, the Friends Hospital. Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
Friends Hospital. I don't know what that is.
Here it was saying it was a private mental health facility.
Okay.
That the Quakers, because the Quakers were the ones that started with the shackles in the basement. They're the first group of people, I guess, that was like, hey, we got an issue. We need to figure out how to handle it. So it sounds like
Step one,
later
lock them
on,
away.
Yeah. Well,
While
they
we
didn't know
think
what
about
else to
it.
do. They're like, okay, they're crazy. Just put you down there. And then they were like, all right, let's figure this out. And then made a different kind of hospital in 1817 that sounds like it still is going to this day. So I hope it's more humane practices compared to some of the other alternatives.
Hope so. Wow.
Okay. So yeah,
They like that there, or they're like, oh, we have all these people that are just crazy. We got to figure out what to do with them. Like, well, let's just lock them in the basement for now.
Yeah.
We'll
We'll figure out later.
Figure out what to do. Did you try dunking them in cold water and then hot water and then cold water?
Oh, that's not yet. That's a great idea, though. We're going to get right on that. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, good.
So that being said, we have a really cool video. It's a little on the long side of a video, but there's a lot of really fantastic information in this video about the story of state hospitals and institutionalization, generally speaking. So I think we should watch that.
Okay.
And we can always, of course, pause and discuss, which I'm sure will happen at some point. If anybody has anything they want to bring up, please mention it in the chat. But let's
only issue these institutions faced, however.
Whoa.
Worcester Hospital
We
was
do not need to start in the middle. It's ridiculous.
Sometimes we like to start in the middle of videos.
So yeah, we're totally down to discuss any of these specific things. But this is good because it's a pretty good overview of like the whole situation. Which is good. Hold on, I'm trying to.
Princess said, don't forget the hospitals shown in the Dracula movies. Those were the height of medical care at the time in history. What Dracula movies? A lot of Dracula movies.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's Sarah. That is random, but it's very true, Sarah.
Aw, thank you.
Random
Thank
but
you so
true.
much. Oh, I really appreciate that. Yeah, Sarah came to karaoke last night. It was awesome.
I like it. Random facts by Sarah.
No, that's really sweet.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't feel like it's like much different from my speaking voice, but you know, it's always going to be different to some degree. Yeah, I guess I didn't think about that. You never saw me singing before. I can't get this lined up properly. Okay, that's good enough.
Good job.
Okay, let's go in. Let's learn some history. You guys ready? I'm pumped.
I'm ready.
Okay, we're in it together. Let's do it.
Historical. Oh, look at that VHS play up there.
The insane asylum is an infamous American cultural icon, most often associated with foreboding, inhumanity, and suffering. But there is more to this story, a story that can be revealed by asking the four following questions. Why were they founded? How did they operate? Why did they fall out of favor? And what legacy did they leave behind? Today, state schools and hospitals are all but extinct, an extinction that was brought on by miraculous advancements in medicine and positive changes in the perception of those who are mentally ill and developmentally disabled. Despite this, these institutions have stayed alive through stories told by individuals, literature, film, and even video games. Perhaps a relative once worked at a state hospital as an attendant, or a family member or friend was once a patient. Perhaps you have read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or Girl Interrupted, or seen the movie adaptations of both. Perhaps you saw one of the numerous TV exposés that revealed the truly horrific conditions of state schools in the 1970s. Perhaps you have explored an abandoned institution or heard spooky stories from someone who has.
Not
But
yet.
however much you think you know about the history and legacy of state psychiatric institutions, you do not know it all.
Listen, we're gonna learn some stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably know a lot of it already. We're gonna learn more details. We may have not know, or may have forgotten,
True.
perhaps.
A note on language.
I have
As
seen
we have
Girl
strived to
Interrupted,
better
so
understand mental health
probably
and
know.
developmental disability, the terminology used to refer to these conditions and those who experience them have evolved. Words such as insane and lunatic were once commonly used to refer to mentally ill individuals. In the early 1900s, terms such as idiot and feeble-minded were considered the proper and respectful terms for those with developmental disabilities. Later, retarded was used in a similar manner. These terms are at best simply outdated and at worst deeply offensive. In this documentary, these words are
they're
used
such good
sparingly,
words.
only when referring to a time
Can't
period
use
in
them,
which
but
they
they're
were
good
acceptable.
words.
Part 1. Moral Treatment. To properly tell the story of institutions, we start not in the United States, but in 18th century France. In that time, mental illness was seen as a disease, similar to other ailments in that it was contracted physically. Methods such as bleeding, corporal punishment, and confinement by chains were used to treat mental health problems.
Jesus.
Indeed, treatment for those considered mad was so tumultuous that London's Bethlehem Hospital, commonly referred to as Bedlam Hospital, became synonymous with chaos and disorder. In 1792, Frenchman Philippe Pinel was given control of the Bicestre Asylum located in Paris. The practices employed at the institution were, simply put, detrimental to the well-being of the patients there. Pinel proceeded to literally unchain 53 of the asylum's patients. He stated that using chains to confine these people was inhumane and did not successfully treat mental illness. Pinel decided that therapy focused on psychology would be more successful, an idea that would become known as moral treatment. In this style of treatment, patients were to be kept in an orderly institution with a rigorous schedule. It was thought that such a regimen would force patients to internalize the values of society and regain their reason. Pinel stated that one of the major principles of the psychological management of the insane is to break their will in a skillfully timed manner without causing wounds or imposing hard labor. Rather, a formidable show of terror should convince them that they are not free to pursue their impetuous willfulness and that their own choice is to submit. Meanwhile, in
Wow.
England,
That was
a
a good
Quaker
idea.
named
Very
William
good.
Tuke independently came to a very similar conclusion. He drove the campaign to open the York Retreat, his actions coming to fruition in 1796. It was so named to convey that the hospital would be a refuge for the unhappy. Tuke and the leadership of the retreat were wary of conventional treatments of insanity, and thus tried to use them as little as possible. Tuke echoed Pinel's beliefs, saying,
There is much analogy between the judicious treatment of children and that of insane persons. Hence the principle of fear, when moderately and judiciously excited, has a salutary effect.
Dr. Thomas Story Kirkbride, who became very important later in the history of psychiatry, reflected upon the achievements of both Pinel and Tuke.
By a singular coincidence, without any knowledge of each other's movement, or at the same time, in different kingdoms, engaged in the same noble work of discarding time-honored prejudices and abuses and giving to the world a code of principles for the moral treatment of insanity.
In 1813, the Asylum for the Relief of Persons Deprived of the Use of Their Reason was founded, one of the first such institutions in the United States. The first wave of insane asylums founded in the United States were private enterprises. Among them were the Charlestown Asylum in Massachusetts, soon renamed to the McLean Asylum, the Bloomingdale Asylum in New York, and the Hartford Retreat in Connecticut. At these hospitals, there was an effort to serve the entirety of the community, rather than just those who could afford treatment. However, this was short-lived. The Charlestown Asylum, founded at the same time as the Massachusetts General Hospital, never admitted patients who could not pay for their own stays. The Hartford and Bloomingdale hospitals originally had a significant number of charity cases, but once public hospitals were founded in the mid to late 1800s, these patients disappeared from private institutions. The Friends Hospital was only ever open to Quakers in these early years, as was the York Retreat. As such, the pauper insane were left to suffer in poorhouses, almshouses, and prisons. Part 2. Noble Beginnings, Harsh Realities. By the 1820s, Americans were expecting more out of their government. Society was rapidly changing, with the first industrial revolution starting to catch steam in the Northeast and increasing numbers of immigrants arriving at the United States' shores. Many recognized that there needed to be formal governmental mechanisms put into place to combat such ills as poverty, crime, and disease. Prisons, poorhouses, and almshouses were the first such mechanisms to be established, with the stated purpose of taking vagrants and criminals off the streets. States in the Northeast, among them Massachusetts, New York, and Pennsylvania, led the charge. Committees in those states found that pauperism, a state of extreme poverty or destitution, was an evil that was best remedied by a creation of a public system of workhouses and strict discipline. Unfortunately, mentally ill people were rounded up with the poor and criminal and not given the careful treatment they deserved. In 1825, the Reverend Lewis Dwight founded the Boston Prison Discipline Society to spread awareness of the inhumane conditions of prisons. He was a part of the American Bible Society, and as a part of this role, he gave out Bibles to inmates. He was disgusted by the conditions he saw in prisons, especially so when it came to insane inmates. Dwight once encountered an insane inmate who had left his room only twice in 10 years. His concerns led to many ideas on how to best remedy the situation, but it was the work of Horace Mann that initiated the founding of Massachusetts' first public psychiatric facility. Most famous for championing public education, Horace Mann was also instrumental in the founding of Worcester Hospital. In a speech to the Massachusetts legislature in 1830, Mann said that,
"While we delay, they suffer. Whatever they endure which we can prevent is virtually afflicted by our own hands. It is now in the power of the members of this House to become protectors to the wretched and benefactors to the miserable."
The Worcester Hospital opened in 1833, with its patient population made up of poor or middle-class people. This took the burden off of McLean Hospital to care for such cases. Indeed, McLean became home to an improved class of sufferers, according to the hospital's superintendent at the time. The number of patients at Worcester rose quickly from 107 at its opening to 359 13 years later. In that time, the reported rate of patients cured was between 82 and 91%. From the founding of Worcester Hospital in 1833 to 1849, a span of 16 years, Maine, New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey, Indiana, Tennessee, Georgia, and Louisiana all opened public asylums. Almost from the outset, these institutions were overcrowded, and as such, they quickly expanded their facilities. Worcester Hospital originally had capacity for 120 patients, and nearly tripled in size by 1846. At least 10 states decided to found additional hospitals to counteract overcrowding by 1875. Overcrowding was not the only issue these institutions faced, however. Worcester Hospital was located in the geographic center of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, far from the state's main population center of Boston. This reflected a belief that a centrally situated hospital would provide equal access to said institution by all the citizens of the state, but this did not work in practice. In actuality, areas farther away from the hospital were not adequately covered. Faced with this situation, bigger cities founded their own asylums, separate from the state system. The most infamous example was the New York City Lunatic Asylum, originally opened in 1825. Located on Blackwell's Island, this hospital was meant to care for the city's poor insane. However, the hospital employed cruel prisoners as attendants and was plagued with overcrowding. Despite the clear need for a new, larger hospital within the New York City metropolitan area, New York State's first public hospital, opened in 1843, was constructed far away in Utica. Likewise, the prevailing theories around care within institutions were deeply flawed when applied in practice. Hospitals, in addition to being overcrowded, were often understaffed. It was originally hoped that institutions would provide personal care to patients and the superintendent would be able to personally oversee treatment. However, in practice, psychiatric hospitals quickly grew too big to have this kind of one-on-one care. Because of this, nurses and administrative staff were more distant from their patients. Thus, psychiatric hospitals evolved into warehouses for the mentally ill rather than a place for treatment. By the late 1840s and into the 1850s, there was a renewed push to establish more state hospitals. This movement was spearheaded in large part by social activist Dorothea Dix and psychiatrist Dr. Thomas Story Kirkbride. In 1843, Dix wrote her first petition to the Massachusetts legislature to support the expansion of Worcester Hospital.
I come to place before the legislature of Massachusetts the condition of the miserable, the desolate, the outcast. I come as the advocate of helpless, forgotten, insane, idiotic men and women, of beings sunk to condition from which the most unconcerned would start with real horror.
This effort was a success, and Dix went on to write many more speeches to be delivered in front of legislatures around the country. The details in these petitions were often gruesome, but that made them all the more effective.
I tell what I have seen, painful and shocking as the details often are, that from them you may feel more deeply the imperative obligation which lies upon you to prevent the possibility of a repetition or continuance of such outrages upon humanity.
Dix appealed to the humanity of senators and representatives, detailing the suffering of the mentally ill she herself witnessed. She saw herself as a friend to the insane, although she did often downplay their own individuality.
I am the voice of the maniac whose piercing cries from the dreary dungeons of your jails penetrate not your halls of legislation. I am the revelation of hundreds of wailing, suffering creatures hidden in your private dwellings and in pens and cabins, shut out, cut off from all healing influences, from all mind-restoring cares.
Damn,
Dix not
that was
only
a powerful
continually
statement.
advocated for the construction
Hi,
or
Krista.
expansion of
Krista,
asylums,
hi,
but she was
honey.
also frequently consulted by
Glad you are here,
psychiatrists and
welcome.
hospital superintendents. By the time of her death in 1887, Dix had been instrumental in the opening or renovation of over 30 psychiatric hospitals in the United States and overseas. Dix was not the only person advocating for the construction of more institutions. In 1854, Dr. Thomas Story Kirkbride, the superintendent of the Pennsylvania Hospital for the Insane, published a groundbreaking book on the subject of psychiatric hospitals. It was titled On the Construction, Organization, and
Oh, no, we
General
love you
Arrangements
too.
of
Sorry,
Hospitals for the
your
Insane,
toe is not
with
so
some
good.
remarks on insanity and its treatment.
But how does soaking
Evidently,
your
this
toe
burdensome title
keep
did
you
not
from-
dilute the book's popularity, as a second expanded edition was
And
published
what'd
in
you do to your
1880.
toe?
General
What did you
Arrangements,
do?
as
Why
the
is it
book is
sore?
hereafter referred to as, was a guidebook on Kirkbride's vision of how to best design and administer a psychiatric hospital. He proposed a universal layout for hospitals for the insane, with a central
Interesting, a
administration
universal
building at the front
layout.
and wings projecting off each side, stepping back with each additional wing. Kirkbride suggested that the most well-behaved and stable patients should be housed closest to the central building, and the more extreme patients to be held in the outermost wings. Kirkbride saw mental illness as
A disease from which no age, sex, class, or profession in life can claim exemption, and that nowhere does it fail to make itself recognized as the great leveler of all the artificial distinctions of society.
In other words, insanity was something that did not discriminate, and that all members of society were equally susceptible to it. Kirkbride held that
Insanity, when uncomplicated, properly, and promptly treated, and having this treatment duly persevered in, may be regarded as curable as most other serious diseases.
as such, formal institutions laid out on a standardized plan would be the best option for those suffering from mental illness. A key point in the Kirkbride plan was that the site of the hospital should be located in the country, surrounded by natural serenity but not too far away from a town of considerable size, good roads, and railway access. The hospital, according to the second edition of General Arrangements, should have an upper limit of 250 patients and be no taller than 3 stories. Kirkbride knew that larger hospitals were detrimental to mental health care.
There is always more difficulty in superintending details in a large hospital. There are more sources of waste and loss. Improvements are apt to be relatively more costly, and the patients will be less comfortable.
Hospitals under the Kirkbride plan were to be well ventilated, built of fireproof material, have doors about 6 feet 8 inches by 2 feet 8 inches, and have workspaces for patients. This latter provision echoes the belief that occupational therapy would be greatly beneficial to psychiatric patients. Additionally, hospitals were to be as self-sufficient as possible. Such was the case at Danvers State Hospital in Massachusetts. Danvers had silos, barns, and cottages, with the farm producing eggs, milk, beef, poultry, pork, hay, and onions. Other state hospitals and later state schools had very similar facilities.
the one,
Interestingly,
Northern State
Kirkbride includes
Hospital
a
in
chapter
Washington
entitled
had the
Importance
farm
of a
as
Correct
well.
Nomenclature. In this
Oh, yeah,
section,
that's right,
he
huh?
states that
It seems especially desirable that this malady, now so much better appreciated by the whole civilized world than formerly, should have every advantage that can result from a correct nomenclature.
in plain terms, Kirkbride argues that the usage of politically correct terminology when referring to hospitals or their occupants is beneficial. Listing out the terms lunacy and lunatic, terms having originated from the belief that mental illness was somehow tied to the moon, Kirkbride says that,
As applied to individuals, they have become offensive for their old associations.
Kirkbride also takes aim at the term asylum, which was commonly used in Kirkbride's time and continues to be used today. He states that custom alone has led to the retention of the phrase, and that it should be no longer used in an official manner. Kirkbride's book was a huge success, and coupled with the drive for the establishment of more public institutions, it had an outsized effect. The first hospital to be built according to the Kirkbride plan was Trenton State Hospital, which was founded directly because of Dorothea Dix's activism. Kirkbride buildings were soon popping up all over the country and even outside the United States. Well-known examples of Kirkbride asylums include St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C., Bryce Hospital in Alabama, Buffalo State Hospital in New York, Oregon State Hospital, and the Danvers, Worcester, and Northampton State Hospitals in Massachusetts. Despite Kirkbride's objections to hospitals caring for more than 250 people at a time, many hospitals opened with a higher capacity. Danvers State Hospital, originally named the State Lunatic Hospital at Danvers, had an original capacity of 305 patients. Much has been made about the fact that the hospital was built on the site of the house of John Hawthorne, who was chief examiner in the Salem witch trials of the 1690s. John Hawthorne was also great-great-grandfather to famous author Nathaniel Hawthorne, who slightly changed the spelling of his last name to avoid association with his elder, who never showed remorse for his actions in the trials. The front door knocker from John Hawthorne's house was saved and later installed on the female nurse's cottage at the state hospital. The construction of Danvers State Hospital caused quite a bit of controversy at the time. Established architect Nathaniel Bradley, who had previously designed the unique train station in North Conway, New Hampshire, and the Boston Young Men's Christian Union building, was hired to design the structure. Critics were quick to decry the richly ornamented Gothic Revival building as unnecessary for a public institution. The hospital's construction budget was overshot, and the completed building leaked in the rain, requiring immediate repairs.
Yeah.
Kirkbride hospitals were, like the institutions before them, quickly overcrowded. Part 3. The More Things Change. As early as 1901, just 23 years after Danvers State Hospital was opened, the trustees appealed for more funding as they were housing over 1,000 patients in a complex that should have only held 450. In the 1930s, the hospital's buildings were woefully outdated and many repairs had to be made. In addition, the campus expanded, eventually including the main Kirkbride, 2 buildings for nurses' housing, 2 chapels, a power plant, the aforementioned farm buildings, 2 cemeteries, a water tower, and a small reservoir, among other small structures. Other psychiatric hospital campuses were similar. Connecticut's Norwich State Hospital, founded in 1904, started out with 2 ward buildings. By 1915, the hospital held over 1,000 patients and found itself needing much more space. According to a 1931 insurance appraisal of the property, there were over 100 structures, among them over 20 ward buildings, barns for farm animals, slaughterhouses, a small fire station, and a clubhouse. Norwich State Hospital had deviated from the Kirkbride plan, being laid out on the cottage plan instead. In this arrangement, the institution's wards were separate buildings connected only by a system of tunnels. Nearly every state hospital was interconnected by a labyrinthian system of underground tunnels.
That's creepy.
These tunnels were mainly used for utility access and patient transport. If an area was experiencing inclement
arms
weather,
just hanging
nurses
out.
and
Yeah, with, like, the
attendants could
radioactive
move
suits or
patients from
whatever
building
on
to
the
building underground for their comfort. Treatments in this era of institutionalization were, by today's standards, horrifically brutal. Insulin shock therapy became popular in the 1930s in order to cure schizophrenia. In this so-called treatment, patients were administered insulin in order to induce a coma, with the coma lasting around an hour. This process was repeated around 30 times, the insulin dosage increasing each time. Doctors reported an improved mental state in patients who underwent insulin shock therapy, but it was not uncommon for patients to suffer negative side effects and even death. Certainly the most infamous so-called treatment of this era was the lobotomy. The precursor to the lobotomy was first performed in 1935 and was popularized a year later by Walter Freeman II. In the late 1940s, the transorbital lobotomy, also known as the ice pick lobotomy, became popular for its efficiency. In this version of the procedure, an ice pick was inserted into a patient's brain above their eye in order to scramble through enough brain tissue to render the patient unintelligible. Freeman toured the nation performing lobotomies until 1967, when the last recipient of his procedure died of a brain hemorrhage. In vogue at the same time was electroshock therapy. The point of this procedure was to induce a seizure in depressive patients in order to improve their mood. This could be dangerous, with some recipients of electroshock breaking bones during the seizure. Now known as electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT, the shock is paired with an immobilizing agent to prevent injury and is performed much less often. Part 4. Downsized and deinstitutionalized. The downsizing and outright closure of state institutions occurred because of a multitude of factors, among the most important being the development of new antipsychotic medicine and the shifting of public opinion against psychiatry. The first antipsychotic medication, marketed as Thorazine, was brought to market in 1954. Thorazine appeared to make the symptoms of schizophrenia, namely hallucinations, aggressiveness, and paranoia, go away. This and other similar medications were soon widely used by psychiatrists to treat their patients. Antidepressants also made their debut in this era. These advancements meant that patients did not have to be strictly treated in an institutional setting. The advent of these new drugs also resulted in the decline of practices such as insulin shock therapy. Not only this, but the public's confidence in institutionalization was in the metaphorical gutter by the 1970s. Perhaps the biggest blow to trust in psychiatry was David Rosenhan's explosive 1972 study on being sane in insane places. In the study, published in the esteemed Science magazine, Rosenhan claimed that he and 7 other individuals had themselves committed to 12 different psychiatric institutions around the United States on the basis that they were hearing voices. Empty, hollow, thud. All but one were readily committed with the diagnosis of schizophrenia, and these pseudo-patients were released on the condition that their schizophrenia was in remission. None of the pseudo-patients had a history of mental illness, but were diagnosed anyway, and none were unmasked as imposters by hospital staff.
Wow.
The method of this study was very similar to that which journalist Nellie Bly used to gain inside access to the New York City lunatic asylum in 1887. On assignment for the New York World, Bly feigned insanity, or what she thought looked like insanity, and was admitted to the infamous asylum. There she witnessed abuse upon abuse. In her 2 articles on institutionalization, compiled in 10 Days in a Madhouse, Bly related an incident in which some attendants attempted to quiet a patient in distress.
This made the poor creature cry the more, and so they choked her. Yes, actually choked her. After several hours' absence, she returned to the sitting room. I plainly saw the marks on their fingers on her throat for the entire day.
After 10 days, Nellie Bly was able to escape the asylum by means of a correspondent from her newspaper who attested to Bly's sanity. As she rode the ferry back to the city, Bly looked back to the island asylum and reflected upon her luck in walking free.
Poor women. They had no hopes of a speedy delivery. They were being driven to a prison, through no fault of their own, in all probability for life. In comparison, how much easier it would be to walk to the gallows than through this tomb of living horrors.
Damn.
Bly knew that the vast majority of those she spent time with in the wards would likely never escape the tomb.
I have watched patients stand and gaze longingly towards the city they in all likelihood will never enter again. It means liberty and life. It seems so near, and yet heaven is not further from hell.
Bly's undercover operation and her subsequent articles in the New York World shocked the public. As a result of the articles, admissions
That's ballsy
guidelines at
getting
the
yourself
asylum were
committed back in
strengthened,
those
and the
days.
budget of the
Yeah,
Department
that's
of Public Charities
scary.
and Corrections was increased by $850,000. However, both of these measures did not do much to alleviate the suffering within the asylum. Conversely, nearly a century later, David Rosenhan's experiment would effectively close out the era of large psychiatric hospitals. The quick admission of the pseudo-patients and their experiences within the hospitals were deeply troubling to Rosenhan. He was led to the conclusion that modern psychiatry could not differentiate sanity from insanity. This was not a new sentiment, but it was the first time that this idea was backed up with sound data. Sound, perhaps, except for the fact that the vast majority of the study could have been made up. In her 2019 book, The Great Pretender, journalist Susanna Callahan tried in vain to corroborate Rosenhan's data by searching for his pseudo-patients. Other than Rosenhan himself, she could only find one who was a graduate student at the time of the study. Regardless of the validity of the study in retrospect, it shook the psychiatric world to its very core. The third edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, known as DSM-3, was heavily influenced by On Being Sane in Insane Places. The DSM-3 was a major contributing factor in the so-called re-medicalization of psychiatry, a strengthening of diagnostic criteria and an emphasis on reliability. Coupled with these private initiatives, the federal government began to push states to close their hospitals. In 1963, mere months before he was assassinated, President Kennedy signed the Community Mental Health Act. Kennedy summarized the situation in his special message on mental illness and mental retardation.
Nearly half of the 530,000 persons in our state mental hospitals are in institutions with over 3,000 patients, getting little or no individual treatment. Many of these institutions have less than half of the professional staff required. Our chief aim is to get people out of state custodial institutions and back into their communities and homes without hardship or danger.
Kennedy predicted that, within 20 years of the Act's implementation, the population of the nation's psychiatric hospitals would be reduced by 50% or more. The creation of Medicare and Medicaid 2 years later hastened this process. State psychiatric hospitals that had more than 16 beds were not eligible for federal Medicaid money, so states started to close their hospitals. In the late 60s and early 70s, lawsuits started to be filed against institutions on behalf of their abused patients. The hospitals were, by and large, ruled against, and so many of them outright closed. From a high of 558,239 patients in 1955, psychiatric hospitals across the United States had a collective population of only 71,619 by 1994. That's a decrease of 82% over 39 years. The question must be asked, where did all these people go? Some moved to new community facilities. However, these facilities never lived up to the aspirations of the Kennedy administration, and often resembled, on a smaller scale, the institutions that they were meant to replace. Some were left homeless, on the street or in shelters. Others ended up in prison or in psych wards and general hospitals. Private psychiatric hospitals like McLean Hospital still existed and continue to exist, but are geared toward wealthier clientele. The lack of a strong mental health care network in the United States is painfully evident. It is a complex issue that is inseparable from homelessness, health insurance affordability, and drug addiction. Yeah. Surely we cannot return to the large warehouse institutions of the past, but the status quo is not the best situation either. Often it seems as if there is no right answer. Part 5. Ruined and Rehabilitated. After the tide of deinstitutionalization emptied state hospitals of their residents and employees, their campuses stood empty. Many were left abandoned for many years, and some continue to sit derelict today, like Norwich State Hospital. Many of its buildings have been demolished, and the rest of the property is, as of recording, being remediated by the town. The property will, within a year from recording, be turned over to the Mohegan tribe to be redeveloped into an entertainment complex to complement the casino across the river. Wow. The legendary Danvers State Hospital is now apartments, with the facade of the administration building and 2 wings having been saved from the wrecking ball. The rest of the buildings, save for the power plant, were not as lucky. The hospital's cemetery has been cleaned up, and many of those who rest there have been properly identified and their old numbered gravestones tossed to the side. Medfield State Hospital's buildings sit empty and boarded up, but the campus is open to the public. Dog walkers and families out to enjoy the fresh air walk by the silent red brick buildings, and even squirrels have found a use for the former psychiatric hospital. The campus is soon to be properly redeveloped, with the vast majority of buildings to be restored and used as apartments and artist space. After Vermont State Hospital closed, its buildings were converted for use as state offices. In 2011, the complex was damaged during Hurricane Irene, with some outlying buildings having to be demolished. The main building, thankfully, has been beautifully restored. Metropolitan State Hospital has been mostly redeveloped, with some buildings demolished and others converted into an apartment complex. One building, however, remains abandoned, covered in graffiti, and open to trespassers, such as the maker of this documentary. Other former state hospitals across the nation have met similar fates. New York's Buffalo State Hospital has been partially renovated into an upscale hotel. Weston State Hospital in West Virginia operates as a haunted house and has been featured as a location in the 2018 post-apocalyptic video game Fallout 76. The Greystone Park Psychiatric Hospital in New Jersey and Pennsylvania's Allentown State Hospital have been entirely demolished, despite the fact that their structures were in very good condition and restoration was entirely feasible. The golden era of psychiatric hospitals is long since past. Their buildings transformed, their former patients and staff getting older every day. We see stories of institutions told in movies like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which reinforces the negative ideas of state hospitals, and Shutter Island, which uses those ideas only to flip them on their head. We see the struggles of psychiatric hospitals reflected in today's mental health crises. While we have vastly improved in the field of psychiatry, there is still so much left unknown. There are still problems to fix and people to care for. There are lessons to be learned in the history of state hospitals so that we do not see history repeated.
That was a great video.
Yeah, that was really good.
That was really interesting.
Super
There's a
informative.
lot of very great information in there. So if anybody's interested, AF Erickson is the channel. If anybody is interested in finding more about that.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's a lot of fucked up shit.
Yeah, definitely.
I find it so interesting that they sent those 8 people as like a farce to go in there and pretend, and we're like, you guys are full of shit.
Yeah.
Diagnosed him anyway.
Yeah.
Man.
Except for one. One didn't get diagnosed. But, yeah. And yeah, for that lady to go in as a reporter and just have herself committed, that's scary.
Yeah.
At that time, like.
Did you recognize her name too?
What was her name?
Her name's Nellie Bly.
Oh, no way.
And Nellie Bly is the name of our favorite kaleidoscope store in Jerome, Arizona. And I never knew who that was. And that's really pretty awesome.
Yeah, I wonder what that connection there is.
I don't know. Wonder if they just thought it was a cool story of this chick that was like...
Yeah, or was she like from the area or something like that? Weird.
I don't know. But that's pretty neat that she infiltrated and actually got herself committed, which, I mean, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
Could have never got out. Excuse me. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, I would not do that. Even for the sake of journalism. Like, that's really interesting that, like, as far as being a journalist, she was like, all right, I'm going in. I mean, I think in order to get a really good idea of what was going on in there, that was the best way to do it. And she said, they said somebody that she worked with came and, like, advocated for her and said that she was actually not mentally ill. So, but I'm glad that they let her out.
Yeah. Yeah, luckily they listened. Well, it said she was also known for her record-breaking trip around the world in 72 days in emulation of Jules Verne's fictional character.
How cool. What a neat lady.
Yeah. She was a pioneer in her field and launched a new kind of investigative journalism.
Ooh.
So, Nellie Bly was her pen name, too. Her real name was Elizabeth Cochran.
Interesting.
Elizabeth Jane Cochran.
Wow.
She had, she had the Asylum expose. She went around the world.
What a cool thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Princess talking about some of the buildings being demolished that were in good condition. That's really interesting that they chose to do that. I wonder if it was just too dark of history and they were like, we're just going to let it go.
Yeah.
At this point.
Maybe, yeah. It's really... Because, yeah, there was nothing wrong with those buildings. Like, I don't know why they would knock them down. I mean, they turned some of the other ones into apartment buildings, so...
Oh, like, I know, man.
Why would you not?
Highway bug.
Highway bug.
Hello.
Hello.
You're working
Welcome
man. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming and checking us out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I wonder if there was something more to it.
I don't know. Interesting.
Because that seems like a bizarre choice to make.
Yeah.
And then talking about Danvers, that's now the apartment buildings. We were looking into it when we were in Massachusetts. We were like, oh, there's got to be a bunch of cool old asylums out here. Let's go check them out. And yeah, the fact that they had knocked down most of the buildings, but only a couple of them remained, and it was apartments. I was like, huh, that's weird. I don't think I would want to stay in an apartment with that kind of energy.
Yeah, it could be interesting. I wonder if the others were knocked down because there was something like, like if there was mold and mildew or something, or if there was some reason that they couldn't just refurbish them or whatever. But I don't know. Seems weird.
It does.
Or if somebody just bought the land and was like, I'm putting my own house on it, knock all these down. Like,
Yeah, maybe it was something stupid like that.
Yeah.
Huh, that really makes
the buildings were pretty, though, so I don't know why they...
Yeah, and especially, too, like, if there's one that's in decent enough condition, that could have been maybe a museum for the history of mental health, which I think would be a very interesting thing to take one of these old hospitals and before they are decrepit and fall apart, to turn it into a place of learning.
Yeah.
Because this is some really dark, fucked up history that, I don't know, I imagine maybe they just want to try to sweep under the rug and pretend like didn't happen, maybe.
Maybe so.
But it happened.
Probably a lot of people that want to do that. But, yeah. Yeah, Princess, right? It did look like a college campus.
Oh, yeah, totally. It's really nice.
Yeah.
Some of these are really nice. I find it interesting, too, in that video they were talking about, like, this standardized floor plan, blueprints or whatever.
Yeah.
Where they're like, okay, this is the most efficient way for us to do this. We can have it be a standardized kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why they would want to make them all the same like that, unless it was, like, if patients were being shipped around due to, like overcrowding in one place, he was trying to keep the populations in each building below a certain number. So I wonder if the patients were being shipped to, like, other locations whenever they got too many people or something. So they wanted everywhere to look the same that they went, so it didn't mess with them. Like, they felt like home once they got there, Like,
That's interesting thought.
But yeah, otherwise, I don't know why they would want them all to look the same. Because if those people aren't leaving, then what does it matter? Who cares?
Oh, you used to drive through it all the time, huh? And where's that one at? Where's that? Greystone? Let's look that one up real quick. Greystone Park, huh? Morris County, New Jersey. Okay. Let's check it out. Began its life as the state asylum for the insane. Okay. 1870s. Okay, there's some cool photos. Wow, that is creepy, dude.
Yeah.
Help. Oh, no, I don't like that. Does that say hater cooler? Water.
Cooler.
I was like, hater cooler. I don't know what that means.
It cools off your haters.
Wow.
The paint peeling. That's weird. The paint was all bubbling up and peeling off like that.
Happens in so many of these places that the paint goes. Our paint's fine. Our paint's fine.
Yeah.
Ours paint, just, all of a sudden people are gone from it, and it's all of a sudden like, paint's peeling.
It just gives up. They left me, I'm peeling.
It's weird.
Oh, there's one of the
Those
underground
spooky
tunnels.
tunnels, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, paperwork.
Old paperwork. Oh, wow.
Wow. That'd be interesting. to look
07?
through.
No shit.
Wow.
Really?
That'd be interesting to look through.
That would be the coolest. I would be so interested in looking through that stuff. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Drawers and drawers. Oh, man. Wow, look at the stairs. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting.
Fireplace. Come on, man. Guess at least they didn't spray paint on this amazing wood facade.
It's true.
Oh, that tile. I like that tile.
Yeah.
He didn't sound too sure when he said that. Okay.
What is it?
It's a doll hung by its feet.
Oh. Yeah. That's a thing.
Wow, this is very
The church? Good.
well preserved.
Yeah.
Thought it was going to be Bottle Boone's farm. It's not.
Nope.
Information bulletin. Okay, old timey. Wow, that's pretty.
Yeah.
Just books and books. It's so cool. So I wonder when they knocked these down, because you said the red buildings were left. So I wonder what this region's all about.
Yeah. Is that a 4-person bunk bed or a shelf?
Shelf.
Okay.
Looks like a shelf. Ooh, creepy. They're just like a walker just in the middle of the way. Ooh.
Boo. It's like they abandoned it before they went up the stairs.
They're like, fuck this, we're not going. Wow.
Yeah, why is all the paint peeling? Just like everybody left and the paint just started peeling. It's really weird. It would do that.
I wonder when it was abandoned. Because, yeah, what is the deal? Like, I've never, ever had paint peel anywhere I've lived. How long does it take for paint to just start peeling?
Oh, hi, pizza. Oh, you didn't get our
Pizza.
notification?
Oh, shit. Dang.
Sorry, I tried
Whoa.
to make it as loud as I could.
Weird. It's turned on and everything? That's strange. Well, thank you for coming and checking, though. I appreciate you. I'm happy you're here. Right, Steve? I would love to go with you and take photos of these places.
Yeah.
This is really, really, really neat. During the day is nice, too. I'm liking the during the day with the sun shining in. Kind of
The daytime exploration.
dealio.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be spooky enough, but at night, I mean, look, there's a phantom right there. It would be totally scary. Phantom.
Yo, oh, and there's a sigil. They're doing satanic worship things. Obviously. I like that clock on the floor right there.
Maybe the interiors get exposed to the elements and then the peeling starts. I mean, it'd have to be something like that, right? I mean,
I guess so.
how else? But it's so strange.
Yeah.
It's such an excessive amount of peeling, man.
Or
And
maybe
even
there
some
was-
of these places we've seen, they're like, it's been abandoned for 10 years. And I'm like, the paint's peeling. I've lived in my house for 8 years. No paint is going anywhere.
Yeah.
I've been in many establishments where the paint is not peeling.
Man, we better be ready to repaint in a couple of years.
I wonder if it's just like having it not be climate controlled. Hot, cold, hot, cold. expanding,
Maybe.
contraction, you know?
It's probably something to do with the type of paint that was used and what it was what they painted over. Like, was it primered of some sort, or was it like a latex paint on top of another latex paint that just didn't work right? I'm sure there's multiple factors, but it's got to do something with being exposed to the elements.
It's gotta be.
But it's got to be like the type of paint used and what it was put on that would affect it.
That's some rusty ass shit over there, man. What's going on? Looks like it exploded rust.
Yeah.
Bleh.
Yeah, and Steve says moisture. And yeah, moisture for sure. But, I mean, we live in a pretty moist area.
Computer.
And then, like, look if, like, the South, like, houses in the South, like, they're exposed to humidity constantly. Like, maybe if the house was just abandoned for a couple of years, all the paint in the houses would start peeling, but it's weird.
It's weird because you think, like, okay, a house or a building doesn't know if people inhabit it or not. It's just a fucking space. But it's like as soon as people leave, it's like, bomb busting out, you know? Like, ah.
Maybe the paint knows.
Weird.
Paint knows everybody's gone, and it's like, I'm going too.
Maybe. So. These are great photos of this place. This is so neat.
Yeah.
Oh, look at all those sinks. I wonder what that's all about.
Oh, they got mirrors above them. I wonder if they're like for like hairdresser situation. I wonder if it's like a barbershop area or something.
Okay. It's a good thought.
I don't know. Oh, that building's cool.
Yeah. Ooh. Do not turn on. Why not? What are we doing? Wow, it just gets crazier and crazier.
Yeah. Now
Little
it's-
Joe's room, keep out.
Ooh. Yeah, now it's dark outside, so it got creepier. Well, look at all those TVs.
Shelter. Whoa.
Yeah. Somebody made a wall of TVs.
Yo, I think I might have had that exact same fucking TV.
Maybe.
Is it a Zenith?
Looks like a Zenith.
I think so. I think that was my first TV. That it looks a little
Wow.
face.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was because it had the two knobs, the like 50 million click knobs, and then the random knobs, and then that little brownish faceplate. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was my first TV. Now that is a cool TV. Oh shit!
Yeah, that's a good one.
Didn't have one of those. Wish I did.
We did have one of the big console TVs, but not like that one.
That's really neat. I really like that. I'm really enjoying this photo shoot that this person took a lot.
somebody
This is
did
very
really
cool.
good with these photos.
And man, it is decrepit in there. It's so cool. More letters. Yo, there's so many artifacts.
Yeah.
Oh, the Phantom's back.
Phantom
No.
is back again.
Right? Asbestos and lead.
Oh, yeah. All
Definitely.
Over. Everywhere.
Look, why don't you real quick, if you don't mind, if you want to look up, like, when this place opened and closed, and when they demolished it or whatever, just a little bit more information. This is the
Which one was it?
Gray Stone in New Jersey. Screaming 60s. That's awesome. I'm really intrigued by this. This is neat. It's just like a gold mine of shit. Oh, there's like questionnaires. Oh, it's a test of personality. I can't believe they just left behind so much shit. And it doesn't even look like it's been abandoned for like the most long. I mean, this is some 80s shit here. Yeah. And then you had some of the like old computer monitors and stuff, so it's probably
Closed in 2008.
wow.
Opened in 1876. They broke ground and started building it in 1871. And then it started being demolished. I guess the parts that were demolished were in 2015.
Damn it, really?
April through July of 2015.
I wonder if they went in and salvaged some of this paperwork beforehand.
I don't know.
They demolished it.
Yeah.
2008, there's, I don't know, maybe certain wings were still active and certain were not because, there's no way that, like...
Yeah, they may have been using certain areas for something.
Because some of it is, like, rough with, like, mold and moss all over it and shit. Like, people were not inhabiting that part.
Let's see.
Interesting. Wow, it's a very cool building.
Says, built in 1876, the facility was built to alleviate overcrowding at the state's only other lunatic asylum, located in Trenton. Originally built to accommodate 350 people, the facility, having been expanded several times, reached a high of over 7,700 patients.
It's supposed to have 350?
Yeah, but they had been expanding. So after all their expansions, several times, it says, they reached over 7,700 patients, resulting in unprecedented overcrowding conditions. In 2008, the facility was ordered to be closed as a result of deteriorating conditions and overcrowding. A new facility was built on the large Greystone campus nearby and bears the same name as the aging facility. Despite considerable public opposition and media attention, demolition of the main Kirkbride building began in April 2015 and was completed by October 2015.
Damn. Leave it alone. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love what an in-depth journey, I guess, documentation that they had.
There's a lot of photos. Well, the big area, I guess.
I know, I've been scrolling for a while, and I'm not tired of it. I think it's great. I think these are all great photos. It's really, really cool. We got more shit to talk about, but, like, I'm really enjoying this photo shoot here.
Oh, Krista says that she watched a movie about Nellie Bly not too long ago. It was pretty good telling of her story.
That is awesome.
Cool. I would love to see that, actually.
I would, too. Is it just called Nellie Bly, or is there a name of it?
Yeah.
Because that is super cool. I didn't know about her. I know about the Kaleidoscope store, but I didn't know anything else.
Yeah, all we know is a Kaleidoscope store. And I wonder if it has anything to do with her or if it's a completely different thing.
Ew. Cool. Well, that's a really neat place. That's cool, Princess, that you've been around there at times with the red buildings. That's it, huh? It sucks that this whole building is gone. It's beautiful. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that main building was demolished. Even though it was... People fought against the demolition of it, and there were even... like, they tried to appeal it, and there were open protests against it and media attention, and they wouldn't listen. The state went ahead and did it. Says, however, some of the items from the stunning architectural details and other items with symbolic and historic value were rescued from the Greystone main building prior to its controversial demolition. So they were able to save some of it.
I am so glad that they went in and at least grabbed some of the neat things, because that's way too cool to just let go. There was a lot of cool shit in there.
Yeah. Woody Guthrie spent time there.
That's a country music guy, right?
The folk singer guy.
Like, he spent time there, like, as a patient?
Yeah, it said that he wasn't committed, but he remained there due to Huntington's disease from 1956 to 1961.
Wow. Okay. Wow, curvy, awesome. It's Christina Ricci playing Nellie Bly.
Oh, no way, really?
Called Escaping the Madhouse.
Cool.
Thank you. That is definitely something we will watch. That's right up our alley for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Okay. Cool. I enjoyed that. That was a nice little rabbit hole to go down.
What was it? Escaping the Madhouse?
Yeah. Sweet.
Yeah. Well, then we're going to watch that for sure.
Definitely. I'm into it.
Looks like it might be on Hulu. Hooray.
Sweet. Okay, so we've got another short little video about what it was like to be a mental patient in the 1900s. And then I'm going to show something
Terrible.
fucked up.
It was terrible.
Yeah, so since we're talking about all the shit that they went through, let's see this video's got to say.
In the 1900s, psychiatric hospitals were known as lunatic asylums or insane asylums. And officials there would lock patients up against their will, despite having few ideas about how to properly treat their problems. In 1900, patients at psychiatric hospitals in the United States faced inhumane treatment that today would be regarded as nothing short of torture. So, today, we're going to take a look at what it was like to be a patient in a U.S. mental hospital in the year 1900. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the
Probably
Weird
gonna
History
suck.
channel and let us know in the comments below
Probably gonna be
what other
terrible.
medical-related
Yeah.
topics you would like to hear about. Okay, hang on. This one is gonna get crazy.
Okay. Ready. Should have made some
In the
popcorn
early
for
days
that.
of psychiatric hospitals, not everyone chose to enter one of their own free will. In fact, up until the 1960s, the majority of patients in the U.S. mental health facilities were admitted involuntarily.
Wow.
By contrast, about 71% of people in psychiatric institutions today are there voluntarily. The problem wasn't just with medicine. It also had a lot to do with the laws that allowed families to commit their relatives with little to no supporting evidence.
Yeah,
In
bad
1860,
whiskey.
for example,
Bad whiskey,
based
man.
on an Illinois law, Elizabeth Packard landed in an asylum for 3 years for no reason other than that she practiced a different religion from her husband.
Oh,
Parents also
geez.
routinely committed their children to mental institutions for questionable reasons. In 1883, Henry Fraser was sent to an asylum in New Orleans because his mother called him uncontrollable, saying that he played with himself to complete exhaustion. Exacerbating the problem were perverse financial incentives for the hospitals themselves. That is, families could literally just purchase confinement for relatives they didn't want to deal with. I can see that temptation. And patients might stay in psychiatric institutions for extended periods. By 1904, only 27.8% of asylum patients in the U.S. had been institutionalized for a year or less. The vast majority were long-term cases.
Wow.
That's horrible.
Given how awful the care was, some people with mental health issues tried to hide their condition to avoid being sent to an asylum. And it's hard to blame them. In 1887, journalist Nellie Bly agreed to go undercover in a mental asylum to record the conditions inside. She reported horrific treatment from doctors, including hair pulling and solitary confinement. Bly also decried the way patients were treated like prisoners. She wrote of how when she couldn't sleep, she would lay in bed imagining how horrible it would be if a fire broke out in the institution. Bly had noticed that every door in the building was locked separately, and the windows were all heavily barred, meaning that escape was close to impossible. A doctor had told her that in one building alone there were some 300 women locked 10 to a room, and it was impossible to get out unless the doors were manually unlocked. By the early 20th century, many mental hospitals routinely tested patients for syphilis. We now know syphilis would remain incurable until the advent of antibiotics. But in 1900, at the Oregon State Hospital, doctors used what was called malarial treatment for people newly infected with the disease. Doctors who used the treatment, first advocated by Dr. Julius Wagner Jauregg, intentionally injected malaria germs into a patient's bloodstream based on the theory that malarial fever could kill syphilis. Wagner Jauregg's research showed that approximately half of these patients saw a reduction in syphilis symptoms after the malaria infection, which sounds pretty promising. However, the same research showed that at least 15% died from the treatment, which is less promising, although it didn't stop them from using it. The earliest treatments for mental illness were, to put it mildly, absolutely brutal. In the early 19th century, asylums in England used a wheel to spin patients at high speed. Other treatments, still used at the end of the 19th century, included harnessing patients and swinging them, or branding a patient with hot irons in an attempt to bring them to their senses. You're probably thinking that eventual improvements in medical technology meant better treatment, but that was far from the case. It usually just meant new forms of torture. By the 1930s, doctors began to experiment with new, troubling methods of treating mental illness, which included lobotomies and electroshock therapy. Patients soon learned the only way to get out of the insane asylum was to fake it. You do just what the doctor says if you want to get out of here, one patient said. Of course, while faking it might have gotten you out, it didn't cure you. The same patient we just quoted later died by their own hand. Mental hospitals around 1900 didn't just treat adults, they also admitted children. Between 1854 and 1900, the Worcester County Asylum screened hundreds of children who were 16 or younger to determine whether they needed treatment. The asylum admitted nearly 200 children.
I'm going to go back just a second. It looked like the kid was sitting on a bed.
Mental hospitals around 1900 didn't just treat adults, they also admitted children. Between 1854 and 1900, the Worcester County Asylum screened hundreds of children who were 16 or younger to determine whether they needed treatment. The asylum admitted nearly 200 children, recording their violent tendencies and risk of suicide. One study found a high death rate among the children, who rarely saw their families after being admitted. This isn't too surprising, given that doctors treated the children in the same way as their adult patients, making no allowances for their young age. Inside the mental hospital, patients slept in single rooms or dormitories. Nellie Bly described women sleeping 10 to a room, with locked doors and bars on the windows. And at the Oregon State Hospital, we know that sleeping rooms were 7 by 14 feet. The Morning Oregonian reported in 1883 that the hospital contained modern technology, including dumbwaiters that opened and closed as they traveled, to prevent patients from escaping. Ironically, late 19th century reforms had proposed treating mental illness with rest, beautiful buildings, and manicured grounds, resulting in majestic architecture on the outside of mental hospitals. It was all so nice, the facilities sometimes even attracted asylum tourists. However, despite the tranquil outsides, the conditions inside the hospital still reflected the idea that patients should be treated as prisoners. In 1900, the lousy treatment at psychiatric hospitals wasn't solely reserved for long-term residents. In fact, newly admitted patients were often immediately subjected to dehumanizing tests. At the Oregon State Hospital, for example, patients had to empty their pockets and strip for a bath. After a medical examination, patients underwent blood and syphilis tests. Finally, they might be shown to a room with bars on the windows and left alone. Women's institutions sometimes used different procedures. According to Nellie Bly, her examination to fully determine if she was mentally ill included a physical assessment, where a doctor accused her of taking drugs. You'd think a top priority for a psychiatric facility would be to make sure everyone could easily tell the difference between doctors and patients. But that wasn't always the case. At the Oregon State Hospital, at least, the standard white outfits could actually be confusing. According to one patient, neither patients nor staff wore uniforms. The first person this patient saw was a man in a white apron. He thought that person was an attendant, and he asked him a question. But later he learned that that man in the apron was also a patient, and the two were in the same ward. Awkward. During his involuntary commitment, the patient found himself perpetually confused, eventually concluding, usually the attendants are a little better dressed than the patients.
Wow.
That's interesting.
At St. Elizabeth's, also known as the Government Hospital for the Insane, Dr. Harry Hummer promoted eggs as an important part of the diet for sick patients, recording that 125 patients went through 17 dozen eggs every day. Patients with epilepsy, meanwhile, received a special diet. According to Hummer, these patients were not allowed to have anything that doctors thought would upset them, which included foods like corned beef or cabbage, and so-called heavy indigestible foods. Nellie Bly described a meal consisting of tea, a single piece of bread, rancid butter, and 5 prunes. After a 10-day undercover visit in Bellevue Hospital, Bly reported, "The eating was one of the most horrible things." However, conditions could vary, and patients at another asylum reported the dining room felt more like a restaurant or hotel dining room. Patients sat together while other patients served them. Some institutions also grew their own food on the grounds, with patients working in the field to theoretically improve their mental health, which also saved money for the institution. State mental hospitals often housed multiple patients in barracks-like conditions that were significantly less than pleasant. In the nights before patient Taylor Benjamin, a.k.a. John the Baptist, died at the New Orleans City Insane Asylum in 1893, he reportedly slept very little, if any, at night, and was constantly screaming. One patient at the Oregon State Hospital also reported a complete lack of privacy. When he was resting in his room on his first day, another patient wandered in to tuck in the sheets. He was followed by 2 other patients who simply stared at the new arrival without talking. Room service, Bellevue Hospital in New York, featured similar conditions. Nellie Bly reported about a crying woman who begged for death nearly the entire night. Another woman repeatedly yelled, "Murder." That's a tough environment to work on your mental health.
Jeez.
Well, if one's begging for death and one's screaming murder, you can get them together.
Work it
and
out,
get both
Reformers
of
in the
them happy,
19th
right?
century encouraged states to build insane asylums. The effort was successful, and by the 1870s, most states had built at least one asylum, using tax dollars to treat those labeled insane. The Oregon State Hospital opened in 1883, and by 1936, the state had expanded the facilities to 2 additional buildings. At the time, the institution treated 2,400 patients. Reformers also argued that mental illnesses
Hey,
could be
Harry,
treated by
how's it
rest and
going?
recuperation,
Hi,
which
Harry.
drove the creation of peaceful, manicured estates
Nice
to
to
treat
pop in.
patients. These often included gardens and lawns where patients could walk, and architecturally beautiful structures. Asylum tourism became a popular pursuit by the late 19th century. Guidebooks even recommended visits to asylums, including the Bloomingdale Asylum for the Insane, which, according to one guide, had one of the most extensive and beautiful views of any in the vicinity of the city.
Look at our beautiful establishment. It's so nice.
Doctors
Yeah.
believed many different conditions could cause insanity, and sometimes committing patients to insane asylums was their only option. Records from the New Orleans City Insane Asylum in the late 1800s, for example, included notes from doctors that listed some of the reasons they might commit a patient. A man named Frank Camba was committed because malarial fevers had left him deranged. One William Byrne was institutionalized after he fell from a horse and landed on his head, which doctors said caused a softening of the brain. Henry Schreiber's diagnosis was congenital idiocy, and doctors wrote he had been an
Wow.
idiot from birth. And in the case of Jane D. Passay, who apparently drank too much whiskey, doctors concluded the cause of her insanity is chronic alcoholism. Good
Bad
times.
whiskey.
Bad whiskey.
So what do you think? How much has mental health changed over the years? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our
Interesting.
weird history.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was a little extra enlightening, I guess, to see what people had to endure while in these asylums
Yeah.
at the time. That's very interesting. That many people in these little rooms and everybody just completely locked in, bars on the windows. I mean, I would imagine that you wouldn't be able to just wander free, but that does sound so much like imprisonment.
Yeah.
And having all the horrible food and everything, like prisoners. That in no way is helping mental health.
Yeah, especially them being strip searched before they come in, and then like going through the whole entry process just sounded like going into prison. Like, not good.
And that most of them were long-term patients.
Yeah.
I was wondering that, actually. Like, I bet not that many people actually got out.
Probably not.
Because they probably didn't want people getting out and spreading the word about how fucking shitty that it was, too.
Probably, yeah. Yeah. And then with just their vague ideas of what counted as insanity, like, there's no cure to some of that. So it's like, even if people were completely sane, they've deemed them to be crazy. And how are you going to prove that they're not? Like, what do they have to do to not be crazy if they're sane?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
is,
very tough diagnosing mental illness when it comes to things like that, because people can be very sneaky and say what they want you to think and not what it actually is sometimes in certain circumstances.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Weird.
Gray area. There's a lot of gray area.
Very gray area.
But, Thorazine sucks. It's not the out-of-body experience you'd expect. Oh, man.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, insanity was a woman drinking whiskey.
Yep.
Pretty much. Actually, which is a fantastic segue into the story of Frances Farmer, who I absolutely, I don't know, I love/hate this story. I hate it for her, but I think it's a really fantastic overview of, I don't know, what women especially had to deal with back in the day if you were not following the societal norms.
Mm-hmm.
So, interestingly enough, Frances Farmer was born here in Seattle. So, she actually lived in West Seattle, which is the area of Seattle that we live in.
Ta-da.
So, there is a bar. Actually, it's on the same block as Yenmore, where I've done karaoke forever. It's called the Benbow Room, and that's apparently back in the old days in the 40s and 50s where she used to hang out. There's even a mural on one of the electrical boxes in the West Seattle Junction that is in honor of Frances Farmer. So,
Isn't she also said to haunt the place? I've heard that they've seen her ghost there.
Ooh.
Or that they think
That's
it
cool.
might be her.
Ooh, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
I heard that just
interesting
recently,
story.
actually. I forgot who it was I was talking to about that, but...
Okay, well, I am curious about that.
Yeah.
Well, so a little bit of backstory about her without going into, like, too many details about her, but we'll just give you, like, the gist here. So, she was a stage performer and a movie star back in the day. So, from 1936 to 1958, she appeared in 15 different films. And she was, like, working with Bing Crosby and Cary Grant. So, she, was part of the beginning of the silver screen Hollywood era. And she was a very beautiful woman. And she was just a little party animal. She was a little bit party-centric, I would say. She party-centric, yeah. She had a drinking problem. She got multiple DUIs. She just wasn't doing what people said that she was supposed to do. And, she was being promiscuous or whatever. Mm-hmm. So her family basically chucked her into one of these facilities. And I'll show you some pictures of her. She was real pretty. This is Frances Farmer. Classic beauty kind of style going on.
She looks insane.
Shush. Yeah, she was born in 1913. Here's her looking pretty dapper. So, I'll go back so I'm not scrolling too fast for you guys. So basically, 1942. So it was at 1913. Said that she's about 30, roughly, when shit started to go pretty fucking bad. So she got divorced. She refused to take a role in a film that she had signed a contract with Paramount, and she refused to do a film. And it did not go well. She basically got, like, the DUI. She also had her headlights on during a wartime blackout, which, honestly, I'm not too sure what a wartime blackout is.
No.
I thought maybe I was the only one that missed it.
Yeah, nope, I don't know what a wartime blackout would be. I mean, yeah, unless it was just like a support your troops type of thing.
I don't know.
But
yeah, she was arrested for driving drunk with the car's headlights on during a wartime blackout. So, I'm curious about that. Okay, Krista says, I just watched Babylon, and now that you're talking about Frances Farmer, it makes me wonder if the character Nellie Leroy was based on Frances Farmer. It was the year 1942. So, she got in trouble for that, and she got sentenced to 180 days in jail. Bummer. So she goes into jail, and she was a little combative while she was in the jail situation. She was not stoked about it. She was being a little aggressive, and, I can't say I quite blame her. So, hold on, I was just reading the comments here. Actually used to shop at the Fry's they had in Fishers near where she's buried. Interesting. Where is she buried at? What is Fishers? Tell me. Because I assumed, I wasn't sure, but I assumed that probably she was buried here in Seattle where she's from. But
yeah, I'm
not sure. Maybe down in, oh no, she moved to San Francisco at one point, so maybe it was the San Francisco area. I don't know. Let me know where she's buried. That'd be cool.
Yeah, and Waybug, I was just reading about what the blackout was. So essentially, it says that it was in preparation for an expected war. It was the practice of collectively minimizing outdoor light, including upwardly directed or reflected lights. It was done in the 20th century to prevent crews of enemy aircraft from being able to identify their targets by sight.
Interesting.
And along coastal regions, shoreside blackout of the city lights also helped protect ships from being seen silhouetted against the artificial light by enemy submarines that were further out. So it prevented them from being able to see the ships where they were. And then I was looking at the U.S. where they had...
That's very interesting. What a cool thing to learn randomly about this. I didn't know.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing.
Oh, and Harry, thank you for letting me know. She died in Indianapolis.
Oh.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, she died of cancer, like, way later in her life. But, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Okay.
So, all right. So, like I said, she got arrested, got in trouble for beating up some of the guards or whatever, just being fairly too intense. So they admitted her into a psychiatric hospital they thought would be preferable to imprisonment. That remains to be seen.
Yeah,
I
right.
do not know. So she spent 9 months in the in California's Kimball Sanitarium. Then her mom went over to L.A., and the judge awarded her guardianship over her. So even though she was a full-blown adult, now the mother is in charge and guardian of this full-blown adult.
Wow.
So they came back up to Seattle, but things did not get much better because in 1944, her mother checked her into Western State Hospital again. So she was released 3 months later. So she was like in and out. So was she really that fucked up? Or was it just, she was just not complying with her mother or with authorities? Like she might have just been a rebel chick. Or she might have had some serious mental illness. Don't know necessarily. But when she returned to the hospital in 1945, she was paroled briefly in 1946. But she would ultimately remain institutionalized at Western State Hospital for almost 5 years.
Wow.
So it was during that stretch that people started having lobotomy talks, that people were rumoring that she was lobotomized while she was in there, but the family highly disputes it. They're like, absolutely not. We did not get her a lobotomy, although the hospital apparently tried to perform the lobotomy without the family's consent, which is fucked up. But the mom came down and like saved the day last minute as part of the story. You know, who exactly knows, but said that they were about to do it in 1947. I guess it was their father visited. It wasn't the mother. It was the father came down and said if they tried any of their guinea pig operations on her, they would have dangled a big lawsuit on their hands. So apparently that was nipped in the bud, thank God. Yeah. But apparently she had really horrible experiences in there. She published a autobiography called Will There Really Be a Morning, and says she was raped by orderlies, gnawed on by rats, and poisoned by tainted food. Chained in padded cells, strapped into straitjackets, and half drowned in ice baths.
Wow.
So that fucking sucks, that somebody that could have been a little rebellious ended up being literally tortured.
Yeah.
And that the parents at any point could be like, oh, institutionalize her again, she's fucked up, and there was no recourse that she had whatsoever. Oh, what's up, DG?
Hi, DG.
Hi.
Hello, hello.
How you doing there, bud?
Gravity Hill. Okay.
Cool. Okay, yeah, there's a lot of these asylums out there, for sure. I don't know how many are still standing. Most of them are knocked down, which really kind of sucks historically. But maybe good to, like, let some of that shit go.
Yeah, maybe it's not a terrible thing.
Yeah. So, Frances Farmer ended up, let's see, dying in, let me see the date of her death. I was trying to figure out the exact date of her death. Sorry, I lagged.
You lied?
No, I said it lagged a little
bit.
bit.
You lagged.
So, even when she was older, like in 1962, she wrote her sister a letter that penned that she had enjoyed the last few weeks so much in a quiet, settled way. I do think I've never felt any better in my life. But even after that, she still struggled with alcohol abuse and had a couple DUI citations on a drunk camera appearance. So she could not get her shit together, basically. She was definitely struggling with alcoholism for sure. But she did keep acting at that point, which is surprising that they wanted her on set, considering she was obviously having some issues. But in 1970, she was diagnosed with esophageal cancer and died at the age of 57. So she made it to 1970. But it's a sad story. It's a sad story about somebody who was just troubled, but ended up having horrible, terrible things happen to them. Like, honestly, she probably would have been much better off if she just lived her life outside rather than having that extreme trauma. But, oh, you're struggling right now too, DG. Oh, you have a giant hug from me to you through the interwebs.
Definitely. Well, that's a rough one.
It really is. I have known too many people that unfortunately have struggled. Some who have made it through the other side and are doing much better now, and some people have not made it. So I would say try to stay as focused as you can on trying to take care of yourself, because there's a point of no return. Don't hit that point of no return.
Yep, definitely.
I guarantee you do not want to go that route.
Very true.
Not good. But yeah,
I'm
so
glad you're working on it though.
Yeah, me too. I'm really glad. And just being focused on it and caring to change your life. That is the biggest thing. Nobody can make anybody do anything. Like, the only thing we can do is make choices on our own and try to better our lives and our situation. So, Yeah, I know. I know the pandemic was definitely tough for a lot of people, but we're out of it now, so we got to make some changes. Good thing about the pandemic, it shook everything up. Now we get to make different choices now.
It's true.
So,
It brought a lot of things to light.
but much love to you for sure, and much support from all of us here to you, and we're very glad that you're here. And thank you for sharing that with us. And if you ever need to talk about it, you just hit us up for sure.
Absolutely.
We're on your side. But yeah, as far as poor Frances Farmer, they actually there's a song about her, which some of you guys might know. It is a Nirvana song on the In Utero album, and it's called "Frances Farmer Will Have Her Revenge on Seattle." And it's a great fucking song. I love it. Just talking about her coming back and like burning the city to the ground because she was so fucking pissed off, about being so mistreated. So actually, there is a misconception about Frances Bean. A lot of people thought because of that song that Frances Bean was named after Frances Farmer, but she was not. She was named after a female punk musician whose name was also Frances. So there you go. She was not named after Frances Farmer, although he was very interested in her story. So just want to give you guys a little, a kind of more personal view of like an individual rather than just thinking about all of these people that dealt with it, an individual that had to endure this kind of treatment.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do now, so I have fuzz like all over my face right now. This is an interesting, it's a short video. It's only about 5 minutes, and it's really interesting because it's a bunch of old photos and videos of the actual early treatments. It talks about the different early treatments, which are all no longer in use right now. It's not like gory or anything like that, but it is a little disturbing. So we put the graphic content warning up there. So this is what was really happening, though. So let's just check out what was really going down back in the day.
During the first half of this century, mental hospitals tried to use medical treatments for people with severe mental disorders. However, the medical procedures used were crude, largely ineffective, and often unintentionally cruel. Some of the leading approaches are shown in this segment. A popular technique was hydrotherapy, in which patients were sprayed by water in order to stimulate them.
East Coast was famous for this. A lot of the facilities used the hydrotherapy.
Mm-hmm. The wet pack consisted of packing, that is, wrapping patients in wet sheets.
How is that supposed to help
anybody? That's terrifying. I don't like that.
No, I don't see how they thought that could actually help anybody.
Yeah, what is that supposed to be doing?
You're trapped now in wet, awkward sheets.
Yeah.
This next procedure, the continuous bath, was kept at 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Its aim was to sedate patients. Hot boxes and lamps were used in order to help relax patients.
Like a sauna that you're trapped in?
I feel like I could use a hot box. Then I don't have to sit in front of the space heater all the time.
No, it's not quite waterboarding, but it is hydrotherapy.
A predecessor to electroconvulsive therapy was insulin therapy, although this approach was more dangerous and less effective than ECT has since become. Yeah, insulin therapy was developed by Viennese physician Manfred Sackel. It was used primarily on patients with schizophrenia. The idea was to give patients insulin, which would make their blood sugar drop. The patient would then slip into a coma, and most importantly, would experience a convulsive reaction. One form of reaction brought about by insulin therapy was called wet shock because it included profuse sweating and drooling, as seen here.
So weird. Insulin. We're going to give you a bunch of seizures. We're going to just keep giving you more and more and more until you have more kind of seizures. That's definitely going to heal your brain.
Yeah, totally.
That's so fucking weird. This is what they would do to people back then.
Yeah, it's so weird where the thinking was behind some of this, like the insulin thing and like the wet sheet wrapping. Like, what
Another
does that do?
reaction
No, it's
brought
not
on
doing
by
anything.
insulin therapy was
No idea.
so-called dry shock, involving a full brain seizure.
Jeez,
What the fuck?
why?
Glucose, given by nasal tube or by injection, was needed to bring patients out of their insulin-induced coma.
What the fuck? Yes, it's like how they
Metrosol
die in
therapy,
comas
an
and stuff
intravenous
like that.
injection of
Yep.
Metrosol on patients, again primarily with schizophrenia, was another form of convulsive therapy that was used prior to ECT or electroconvulsive therapy. It was developed by Hungarian physician Vanislav Meduna, and the intravenous injection of Metrosol typically produced grand mal type seizure.
What about that seems like it's helping? Like, we should
Finally,
give
one
them
of the
brain
most
damage so
notorious
they're
of
not as
all early
crazy,
procedures
I
was
guess.
the lobotomy, a brain operation in which a surgeon would cut the connections between the cortex of the brain's frontal lobes and the lower centers of the brain.
Oh, gross.
We're going in.
Warning, graphic content. We're going through the ear. What are you doing in this ear? Is that an ear?
I don't know what that is. I mean, it should be the eye, but I don't.
Maybe that's an eye. Maybe it's like a held open eye.
What the fuck? Ew.
Okay. Yeah. That probably would have been worse if I could tell what was going on.
Yeah. Oh, it really abruptly ended, doesn't it?
Yeah, the end. Okay.
Yeah, weird. But okay, so that's some of the super neat treatments that they would do on
Yeah.
the people.
Let's-
It's very disturbing.
Yeah, that's pretty disturbing.
It's interesting though. Like, okay, hot bath. We're doing a hot bath. It's gonna calm you down. We're gonna put you in a little sauna thing, trapping sauna, wrapping you in wet sheets. Like, I don't understand how they thought that this was going to cure people in any way. So eventually, there was, I don't remember the name of the doctor, but there was one doctor that said, hey, I don't think we should be doing these kind of things. I don't think this is helping. We need to have one-on-one, like, counseling sessions, essentially. We need to talk to people, give them individualized treatment, and talk with them. I think that will work better. And that's when things kind of started transitioning, because it was, being seen as inhumane how they were treating people. But at the time, people thought, hey, it's just what you do. This is just what you do. People are crazy, you do this. Even my uncle was born mentally challenged, and he was in a facility until he was 18. So he was in one of the child facilities. And at 18, they just kind of set him loose, and they're like, well, you got to take him. He can't stay here anymore. And they couldn't afford to put him in a decent facility. So they took him home, and he stayed with them and for his entire life. But he had electroshock therapy, among, I'm sure, a lot of these other horrible things. But all I know for sure is that he was a patient of the electroshock therapy. My very own uncle. And you know what? It didn't help anything, because I don't know what the official diagnosis would be at this point. But during that time, they didn't understand mental health as well. So I would say, I guess, severely autistic on the far end of the spectrum. He had a very underdeveloped mind, and he was definitely OCD. It just seemed like he had the mind of a child his entire life, and was extremely obsessed about doing things the exact same way every single day, over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
Interesting But yeah, it didn't work. Oh, they're going to put you in a facility and do all this crazy shit and shock your brain and everything. And, like, his brain just didn't function typically.
Yeah.
You know, and that didn't help anything.
So Steve was saying that the constricting was thought to calm people down, like a hug jacket on dogs, which that's kind of what I was thinking. Is it like a weighted blanket type of thing? Like maybe it's like supposed to be a calming thing where you wrap them in the wet sheets and it's like a constriction, like a hug type of thing. It's the only thing I could think.
Interesting. Okay.
And then Kirby's saying that they still use electroconvulsive therapy to treat bipolar disorder that doesn't respond to medication, and I know they do still use it. I didn't know that it was specifically for bipolar, but I knew that they used it sparingly at this point. But yeah, and then the lobotomy, like DJ was saying that, you know, tear apart the frontal lobe and you're fucked forever, and then Prentice was saying that if you screw at the frontal lobe, it would calm the patients down sometimes and fix the problems for the family. And that's the thing, is like there was so many mixed like outcomes on it. Like some of it resulted in death, some of it fixed a problem that they had and they were, you know, better than they were anyway, and some of it just didn't do anything. Some of it just made them invalids, you know, like it was just like all over the place. But it was not something that they could really predict. But as far as fixing it for the family, I mean, like it got rid of that person from the family, and they didn't have to deal with it anymore at the very least, you know. But it's definitely a decision.
Yeah, some people were very violent or extremely worked up all the time, you know, like it definitely calmed them down as far as that goes. So there's that, but giving somebody brain damage is not good. And it sometimes went better for some people than others, you know, like we were talking about Kennedy's sister. Like that did not go well.
Nope.
That was not good.
Not good at all.
But some people were able to function more I don't know, better in society, I guess, than people like Kennedy, you know, who was pretty much an invalid.
If it was people that were having like violent outbursts and like just like, you know, conniption fits, then it at least calmed them down and quelled them to the point of, you know, even if they were just like lethargic and not really doing much, at least they weren't having those violent outbursts. So from the family's point of view, they're like, well, this is way easier to deal with. So to the family, they're like, it worked, you know. But
and if they were at a facility, from the doctors and nurses, it was easier to handle somebody who was less intense, I guess. Not that I agree with it, but I can understand them being like, oh, that's so much better. They're not freaking out anymore. They're not trying to punch us in the face constantly and screaming in the night, you know? Like,
they stay in bed all day now. That's way easier. Like,
that's fucking crazy.
That's the thing.
I don't understand how you can stick an ice pick in somebody's eye and they don't just immediately fucking die. Mm-hmm. You know? So...
Let's see.
Are you going to read that?
Yeah. So Kirby says, many mental health disorders stem from issues with the amygdala, which is the part of the brain responsible for filtering out extraneous sensory data. Disassociation disorders are when the amygdala filters too much out, and things that involve hallucinations are when the amygdala doesn't filter enough. So the brain does its best to try to interpret extraneous sensory input.
Interesting.
Okay, so if they can fuck with that, you know, it may or may not help the situation, I guess, to some extent. But what are the side effects of it? Like, it might help this one problem, but it could make 5 more problems. Or not.
Yes.
You know.
So, that being said, we'll watch this little video here about the lobotomy. Princess says, that's why I stopped after my undergrad and had to find a different direction for school. Couldn't face the crap that they were doing. And the psych wasn't fully developed yet, so I couldn't agree with any programs available at the time. Interesting. Okay, well, that definitely makes sense, and I give you a lot of credit for your conviction and being like, I don't agree with any of this shit. It's fucked up.
It makes a lot of sense.
It is. Yeah. Oh, good night, Steve.
Good night, Steve. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Night.
A lot of the recreational substances some of us have come to know and love, like psychedelics, loosen the filter, and ketamine tightens the filter. Oh, okay, that makes sense. I didn't really know that, but that makes a lot of sense.
It does, for sure. Okay, well let's learn a little more about the super cool lobotomy.
Okay,
So
let's learn about lobotomies.
That would be perfect for those who suffer from stress and anxiety, heal depression, insomnia, eliminate suicidal thoughts, delusions, hallucinations, melancholy, and obsessions.
This is how, in the 1930s, American newspapers advertised not chamomile tea or sessions with a psychologist, but an ice pick put in your head. Or in other words, a lobotomy. Egas Moniz, the father of lobotomy, was awarded the Nobel Prize for inventing this barbaric surgery. But what if the award was well-deserved? In this video, I'll tell you, how did a lobotomy replace an enema in treating stomach disorders? Does the ice pick in the skull affect a person's character? And most importantly, could people be wrong in banning lobotomy?
Well, there's a few people that could use lobotomies.
In the early 20th century, a mentally ill person was an awful stigma to their family. Society used to believe that those people didn't deserve to live. That's why they were treated worse than criminals. They were locked up in prisons, tortured, or killed. Mental hospitals were supposed to become a humane alternative, but they didn't. Patients were chained to walls or beds, got electrocuted, or forced to take antipsychotic drugs. They could be kept in asylums for years without visible improvement signs. But the lobotomy changed everything. First of all, it let people who suffered from mental disorders avoid ending up in an asylum. It sounds a bit paradoxical, doesn't it? Just like if I said we should rescue flu patients from cough syrup. Especially since a lobotomy looked no less frightening than mental hospitals. The surgery was performed using a device that resembled a regular ice pick. Instead of anesthesia, a patient was electrocuted so that they lost consciousness. Then the ice pick was pushed inside the eye socket and hammered through the orbit bone that's as thin as an eggshell. The surgeon would sweep the instrument from side to side to cut the connections between the frontal lobes and the rest of the brain. All of that could last just 10 minutes. And boom, an aggressive patient who was dangerous to society became obedient and submissive within minutes. Yes, that's quite a dangerous practice, but it spared people many years of enduring barbaric and excruciating therapies and specialized facilities. The most famous patient who underwent the lobotomy is Rosemary Kennedy. That's right, a sister of the U.S. President John Kennedy. The young woman faced slight developmental delays that impacted her school performance in her childhood and young adulthood. However, as Rosemary grew older, she experienced seizures and temper tantrums and later became aggressive towards other people. In 1941, when the woman turned 23, she was lobotomized. As a result, she stopped being prone to violence and dangerous to society. Whereas Howard Dully had surgery when he was a 12-year-old boy, and he's still alive. In his childhood, Howard lost his mother, which negatively affected his mental state. He acted aggressively towards his mother-in-law. The woman feared for her life because of her son-in-law's unruly and violent behavior. For that reason, it was decided to lobotomize the child. He's 72 now, and he has no history of any sort of trouble over this time. Lobotomy became a magic wand that, by touching a specific spot on the human skull, turned a villain into a good guy. But how did people understand which parts of the brain affect human behavior and how? During archaeological excavations all around the globe, researchers found lots of skulls with holes. It's assumed that it was a method our ancestors used to treat headaches. theories suggesting that every part of the brain is responsible for some particular function appeared long ago in the ancient world. It's believed that some areas in the frontal lobe control our thinking, will, initiative, and decision-making. Egas Moniz considered that assumption and summarized the knowledge of his head wounds during the First World War. And then he thought, what if some injuries inflicted on the frontal lobe of the brain could be helpful in some way? What if that could let us modify human behavior? At the Neurological Congress, he learned that scientists had already removed monkeys' cerebral cortex parts. The apes continued to live after that, but were no longer restless. Moniz came up with the idea that perhaps people with psychotic disorders could be treated the same way. That was when he started drilling heads of mentally unstable people. And it worked. The lobotomy gradually became a solution to deal with those who were a menace to society. Nobody ever questioned the effectiveness of the lobotomy because doctors didn't fully understand how the brain works. But they believed that the lobotomy helped, according to the traditions of our ancestors, teachings on the spots of the skull, and miraculous examples of healing. The lobotomy was believed to be the best cure for rebellious daughters. We now know that hormonal surges and mood swings are typical during puberty, and that there's nothing abnormal about that. But back then, society saw a fiery temper of a young lady as poor etiquette, and a lobotomy made her calm and obedient. LGBTQ plus people used to be diagnosed with attachment disorder. That meant the patient was attached to inappropriate erotic and sexual desires. Doctors believe that using various stressors like an electric shock or skull drilling could modify the behavior and lead to heterosexuality and recovery. But the thing is, diagnoses like that were made up not even by doctors, but rather by relatives of supposedly ill people. Nobody asked them if they agreed to undergo a lobotomy. The operation was forced on the patients by their families. At the same time, doctors didn't mind and eagerly helped, but all they had on their minds was making money. However, the situation rapidly changed, and soon people started joining the queue for the lobotomy. But why? All came down to Walter Freeman, a neurologist and psychiatrist. But I'd instead call him a showman and the best marketing specialist in human history. Freeman wasn't even a surgeon, and as a matter of fact, couldn't operate on his patients himself. That didn't stop him, though. Egas Moniz said that a lobotomy was an extreme measure, but Freeman made drilling holes in a human skull a panacea for all problems, including waywardness and violent nature. He promoted it as a treatment that was only slightly riskier than tooth extraction. Freeman started offering his services while traveling around to different countries, just like Lady Gaga with the Monster Ball tour. He turned the operation into a big show. For example, he shocked his audience, doctors and nurses, by simultaneously performing lobotomies on 2 patients. He got so many fans that he once operated on 25 women in just one day. As time passed, Freeman started to assure people that the lobotomy could cure everything, even indigestion. A broader spectrum of diseases potentially curable by the lobotomy meant a more significant number of clients. They should have made him a marketing specialist at Quibi, then it indeed wouldn't have shut down. If Freeman could brainwash people into believing that driving an ice pick through their heads was cool, then the Quibi show about a girl who made friends with her boyfriend's sex doll would have become a Golden Globe nominee. Anyway, was Freeman's product as good as its wrapping? What really happened to patients after the lobotomy? Freeman kept quiet about many things in his ad campaign. The barbaric procedure resulted in the death of at least 490 people and made thousands of others go on living in a vegetative state. They lost their ability to react to the outside world and even themselves. And what about those whose surgeries were allegedly successful? Before she went through the treatment, Rosemary Kennedy was just a short-tempered kid with a restless mind. Her family concluded that that could reflect badly on her brother's career, so they turned to Freeman. After the lobotomy, Kennedy's mental capacity diminished to that of a 2-year-old child. She lost most of her ability to walk and talk intelligibly. And in that condition, it's difficult to argue with your parents, isn't it? In his memoirs, the other patient, Howard Dully, who went through the lobotomy at the age of 12, recalls that his stepmother hated him, and he never understood why. One of the reasons Howard's father's new love decided that the kid needed the lobotomy was his weird behavior. He would turn on the lights in a room when the sun was still shining. Is that a good reason for punishing a child? And what if Howard had broken a cup? Would she sentence him to an electric chair? After Freeman performed the surgery, Howard, in fact, became incapacitated and got thrown out of his own house. That was followed by depression, which he tried to get rid of using alcohol and drugs. It took years for him to get his life in order. He told about his pain in a book called My Lobotomy. Howard was fortunate to survive the procedure and to even write his memoirs. Other patients were not so blessed. Most patients who suffered the lobotomy were sent back to asylums. The thing is, a patient's character is in no way influenced by their sex, age, level of education, and most certainly it can't be changed by drilling their skull. Scientists were wrong. And the resulting brain injury didn't transform patients into placid and balanced people. It just transformed them into disabled humans. But this wasn't acknowledged until 1967, when lobotomies were finally banned. Now people are treated in a far more humane way through psychological therapy sessions. And a person's short temper or sexual orientation are no longer stigmas to be ashamed of. To the present day, there are numerous calls to rescind Moniz's Nobel Prize for developing lobotomy. But so far, no luck. The mind boggles at thinking what could have happened if this surgery hadn't been banned eventually. Who do you think could be prescribed the lobotomy nowadays? And what ailments could be treated with an ice pick to the brain? Unwillingness to eat asparagus, uncontrollable scrolling through TikTok, or an overwhelming urge to rewatch Louis C.K.'s stand-up routines? Leave comments with your suggestions.
That is fucked up. I cannot believe that they performed so many of these procedures on people all the time, and that people's family consented to that, knowing that there's such a significant, like, chance of death.
Yeah.
Or incapacitation. Or whatever. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, just like family members sending their own family, like parents sending their kids in to do that, where it's just like, yeah, we should give them brain damage. This one's getting on my nerves. Give them brain damage. Like,
yeah. Oh, this teenage girl is a little bit annoying right now. Brain damage them. So
yeah. Yeah. It's messed up. That's super messed up.
Holy shit. And winning the Nobel Peace Prize, man.
Yeah.
You have the chill of the capybara. That is absolutely fucking true, man.
That's pretty true.
That's 100% a fact.
Right. Yeah.
I love it.
That's about right. That's a great explanation for that. Yeah.
It is. It's so funny.
Yeah. No, I've seen all terrifying things, and I'm good. I don't need to see it anymore. I went through all that when I was younger, and now I'm fine. Don't get on that level. You don't need that level.
No, trying to get on the chill capybara.
Oh, the chill level. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Take on the chill level.
Yes. Harness your inner capybara.
Yeah. I've had friends call it the Zen of Dusty.
Definitely.
Because I'm always Zen. Mostly Zen.
You're mostly Zen.
Unless somebody takes my last Twizzler.
Not Zen.
Not Zen. I'm not Zen.
Wow. Well, that is.
Wow,
that's pretty fucked up, right?
Also, that was illustrating too, like the two dichotomies with the Kennedy lady and then the one dude that's still alive, doing well. Like her, it fucked her up and just made her, you know, essentially an invalid, not fully invalid, but it fucked her up. And then him, he's fine and he's carried on about his life. He's written a book and he's doing good, but not that it didn't come with its own struggles. It was saying that it definitely was hard for him to get back on track, but it didn't just ruin him for life. He wasn't just a drooling mess, but it's interesting how it affects people in different ways.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's like whenever they do this lobotomy and they go in through the brain, if they don't really fully know what it is that they're hitting because they can't see it.
That's what it seems like, that they're just going back and forth, and then in some people it's going a little too far to the left, too far to the right, or too deep maybe, or something. Like it's a very abstract procedure.
Yeah,
it's not very specific.
Doesn't seem very exact. And yeah, I mean, I know they're trying to separate that frontal lobe, like they're trying to break that connection. But yeah, if you're going back and forth, your brain is all mashed in there. You're going to hit other parts of the brain, and who knows what you're messing up. Like, you could just be, like, fucking up a whole section of the brain.
I mean, anytime if you have a pick in your brain, how could that be a good thing?
Yeah, that's not
or
where
a
you want it
safe
to be.
thing in any way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. They do not know. They're just going for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jiggle it, aka scramble it.
Yeah.
That's
just
pretty
scramble
much
it up.
just yeah, not good.
What I want to know is, who was the first person that was ever tested on? Because they had to be like, we're just gonna stick this ice pick in this guy's fucking eye and see what happens. I would think that you would immediately die from that. I would think that you would immediately die. Boom, ice pick in the orbital socket, dead. But obviously that is not what happened.
No.
But they had to take that risk the first time. And then they had to do it multiple times, saying like, oh, did we just get lucky last time? Like, what are we doing? Like, how's this working out?
Yeah.
So that's some balls to do tests like that.
Yeah. Let's see. The first one was a guy... This is coming from the Encyclopedia Britannica. Some of you people may remember what that was. It was performed in the 1880s. I wonder if it says who it was.
Oh, this article pulled up here. That's the controversial history of the lobotomy.
So the first guy that did it, the Swiss physician, Gottlieb Burckhardt, he removed parts of the brain cortex in patients suffering from auditory hallucinations and other symptoms of mental illness. Symptoms later defined medically as schizophrenia. Performed his operation on 6 patients with the specific purpose of not returning the patients to a state of sanity, but of putting them into a state of calm. One of his patients died several days following the operation. Another committed suicide.
Damn.
Though it is unclear whether the suicide was associated with the surgery. However, several of the patients were easier to manage following the surgery. His idea for the operation had been influenced by the work of a German physiologist who had performed brain ablation, a surgical removal of tissue, experiments on dogs, and observed distinct changes in the animal's behavior. But yeah, it doesn't say who the first one was performed on, so they were patients who had been committed, and those records may have been lost to time.
So the first one was a prefrontal lobotomy.
Okay.
It wasn't transorbital lobotomy, which the prefrontal lobotomy is when the surgeon drills holes in either side of the top of the person's skull. and they manually sever the nerves between the frontal lobe and the other regions of the brain.
Okay.
And that's a prefrontal. So it says that in 1935, Moniz, who we learned about, invented it, called the leucotomy. He performed the procedure for the first time in the Lisbon hospital, drilled holes in the person's skull, and injected pure alcohol into the frontal lobe to destroy the tissue and nerves.
Just pouring alcohol in there? Okay, yeah.
And then in 1949, he received the Nobel Prize in medicine for inventing it. Wow. So...
DG, yeah, it was Hannibal. That was the... which one was it? Actually, I think it was the second Silence of the Lambs. I'm thinking. But yeah, where he was feeding him his own brain while he was awake.
Yes, it was Hannibal, yeah.
Was it Hannibal?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Ray Liotta.
Yeah.
Actually,
There
yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a fucked up scene. That was a fucked up scene.
Yep.
That's the only thing I remember about that movie. Is that scene where I was like, wow. Shit, that is fucked up. Dang.
And then that's interesting talking about pouring the alcohol in there because that is what Dahmer was doing. Dahmer was drilling holes and pouring the whatever acid, lysergic acid or whatever, into the brain, trying to get them to be
lobotomized
and remain alive. And it was not working for him. Which you're pouring acid on a brain, so no, not working.
Damn, that's true.
But yeah, he was wanting them to be lobotomized and be alive afterwards, and just have them be essentially a slave, a sex slave.
It's fucked up.
Yeah,
that is fucked up. He just should have done the ice pick thing. Try the ice pick thing.
Yeah, should have gone for the ice pick.
Way easier. So I was saying that a year after the invention, an American neurologist named Walter Jackson Freeman adopted the procedure and renamed it the lobotomy. So that sucks because the guy that invented it named it, and then an American came and took it.
That's so American.
That sucks, dude.
That's great.
And he is the one, actually, Freeman is the one that modified the surgery by introducing the use of the ice pick instead of the alcohol.
Yeah.
So the one as we know it, prefrontal, that was the first one that was ever done. And then this American guy was like, hey, check it out, just the ice pick in this person's fucking head. It's totally fine. It's totally fine.
It's fine. It's good. Look how easy this is.
So then Freeman was the one who performed the first prefrontal lobotomy in the U.S. So, and then in 1945, he modified the procedure again and created the orbital lobotomy, which he could perform quickly without leaving any scars. So it seems like there was like multiple iterations of this.
Went through a lot of experimentation.
Yeah, so interesting. What happens if someone's lobotomized? We kind of know that.
Yeah. Yeah, the first line. What happens if somebody's lobotomized? The first sentence is the effects of a lobotomy are highly variable.
Yeah,
they
one of the
were
reasons
all
it's
different.
been so controversial. True story.
The same hair. Oh yeah, we all have red and blue hair.
So how common were lobotomies? They were widely used from the 30s to the 50s, and roughly 60,000 lobotomies were performed in the United States and Europe in the 2 decades after the procedure was invented.
60,000.
60,000
in 20 years.
So by the 50s, they were like, ooh, so it might not be so good. Maybe we need to tone that back just a little bit.
Yeah, maybe we need to second guess this.
Which they did, in fact, do. Thank goodness. So are they legal and still performed? Lobotomy has been banned in some places, but is still performed on a limited basis in many countries. In 1950, the Soviet Union banned the use of lobotomies because it was contrary to the principles of humanity. Neat. Other countries, including Japan and Germany, followed suit in later years. In 1967, Freeman was banned from performing any further lobotomies after one of his patients suffered a fatal brain hemorrhage after the procedure. But the U.S. and much of Western Europe never banned lobotomy, as the procedure was still performed in these places throughout the 1980s.
Wow. No way, really?
Pluto, did you hear that? So you can hear him purring right now. I would never give you a lobotomy, ever. That's crazy. Into the 80s. They never banned it? I thought that they... I mean, it says he was banned from performing further lobotomies in 67, but then it's saying U.S. and much of Western Europe never banned lobotomy.
Well, I guess it said after one of his patients suffered a fatal brain hemorrhage after the procedure, and then also, if you remember, it said that he was not a doctor. He was not actually authorized to be giving surgeries. So I bet it was something with him not being authorized to do that. He just kind of started doing it and got known for it, and then it finally caught up to him after people were dying. And then this says that surgeons occasionally use a more refined type of psychosurgery called a cingulotomy in its place. The procedure involves targeting and altering specific areas of brain tissue. Some surgeons may use a cingulotomy to treat OCD that hasn't responded to other treatments. And doctors also sometimes use it to treat chronic pain.
Interesting.
Wow, weird. So they're still doing versions of it, but instead of the prefrontal thing or like transorbital going in through the eye or whatever, I guess they're just targeting certain parts of the brain and removing certain parts, which is weird. That's weird. Yeah.
That's craziness, dude.
Which I guess, might make sense if we've done a lot more studies on it, because there's we've done tests with magnets, and they can put like focused magnetism into parts of people's brains and affect different things. Like people can lose the ability to read or lose the ability to speak English for however long that magnet is like pointed at their brain, or they can fix certain things and just like have them recognize things that they could never recognize before in certain disabilities. So maybe with that and being able to now understand a little bit better the different parts of the brain and what these parts of the brain are actually doing, maybe this is something that's a little bit more refined, but it doesn't sound good.
I don't know, man. Princess, about chronic pain, they were saying that to this day they still perform versions of lobotomy, and certain ones can target chronic pain, but they still use it for OCD and chronic pain. But it's not the prefrontal or the transorbital. What was it? What was it called?
Cingulotomy.
Yes, cingulotomy. That's what it is. Where they're just going in and affecting parts of the brain.
Yeah.
That's fucking crazy. I mean, it makes sense if some people are having issues in the brain to go and adjust certain things if it helps.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really...
It says, according to the scientist who pioneered the treatment, some patients improved after getting a lobotomy, but others developed apathy and a reduced ability to feel emotions. Some people became permanently incapacitated by the procedure, and in some cases it was fatal. The procedure eventually fell out of favor, largely thanks to negative press and the growing availability of antidepressants and antipsychotics. So today the procedure is banned in many countries and no longer performed in the United States. So it's not banned here, it's not illegal. They left it open, but they just kind of don't use it. And yeah, with, the drug industry these days, they're going to try and give you drugs.
Absolutely.
Far before they'll ever
That's
do anything.
the main thing for sure. They would just sedate you and get you on
Yeah.
medication constantly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, please don't shove a 9-inch nail through my eye.
No.
Yeah, I agree
Never. I would never want that. Ever. Never.
with that. Yeah. No, not good.
Nope. So that was interesting learning about lobotomies
Lobotomies.
and the other weird treatments.
Yep.
So
Pluto loved it.
Pluto is loving it right now. Could you see his cute little face when he was like so excited? Let me see your face up here. Beep, 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 beep.
Can you look at
He
him?
was just smiling
He's not
and just
looking.
looking so
Yeah.
cute. And I'm sure you can hear him just purring away because he's the loudest purr in the whole world, and he's just so cute. All right.
Just purring away.
Little guy. I'm going to say hi to your friends on the internet. He really smiles. It's really cute, dude.
He does. He's just
so
always
fucking
smiling.
Cute. I know, he's the happiest guy ever.
Yeah.
It's great. Right, you know, little buddies definitely help the mental state quite a bit for sure.
And also being petted. If somebody is just petting you, how are you going to be sad? Can't be sad. Just going to be happy.
Yeah. Love that. That's great.
Yeah.
So, that being said, now we learned a lot of the history of those things. So, there's a bunch of cool lists of places, abandoned hospitals. Pardon me, I'm yawning, sorry.
What?
So, let's see. Well, let's see. Let's do this little. We have a top 10 abandoned mental asylums.
Ooh. Okay.
This is pretty cool. It talks about some cool places in here. So let's take
now
a
that
look
we know
at it.
about the creepy shit that went on in these places.
Yes. So you wanted to let's talk about all the crazy shit that went on, and then we'll look at what's left of them, the rotting exterior of these places, which completely, I don't know, is fitting of the mood of what happened in them. Now they're just empty and creepy and falling apart. So it's extra creepy seeing these abandoned places, knowing that it was immeasurable horrors happening in there for all the time.
Yep.
So the fact that they've knocked so many of them down, like we were saying before, like it kind of sucks from a historical aspect, but at the same time, maybe it's just better to just get rid of some of that.
Yeah, probably so. Nice. DG, yeah, if we go to New Orleans anytime soon, we'll definitely let you know. Like, we love New Orleans as well.
Oh, yeah.
Paul and Princess Kitties are hanging out, sleeping, back to back.
Oh, cute.
That's pretty cute.
I love New Orleans, too. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
So are you near New Orleans? What's up with that? Or you just want to go there, and you just want to go there, like, with us?
Yeah.
What are we talking about? I love it, too.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you came to hang out with us. Thank you for popping in.
Yeah.
You're the coolest.
You are near there. Okay.
You are? Oh, sweet.
Sick. Lucky.
Oh, man, that's awesome. I just want to
Yeah.
come just for the fucking food, man, to be totally honest
Oh,
with you.
yeah.
Yep. So I might end up going maybe the beginning of October just for a few days with a friend. We were chit-chatting about it, so we might end up going on a little New Orleans adventure for just like a short jaunt.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that. Well, I'm not 100% sure if we can do it, but I really hope that we can because I
Hopefully we
really
can.
want some etouffee.
Yeah.
Like, I'll go just for the crawfish etouffee.
Yeah. I need a po' boy in my life.
And the crawfish pie, which is one of the best fucking things ever. I told Dusty, I was like, instead of a birthday cake one year, I just want a fucking crawfish pie. Which is crazy because I love sweets more than anything. But like, there was this restaurant, this Cajun restaurant that was here in Seattle that was my favorite, and it's gone now. And they had slices of crawfish pie, and it was one of the best things I've ever had in my life. So fucking good. So, I'm in Little Rock. I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I've never even been to Little Rock. You know what? I've been to most states in the country. There's a handful in like the Midwest that I've never been to, and Arkansas is one that I've never been to.
I feel like I drove through Little Rock one time, but didn't hang out or anything.
It's one of the only places in that whole region of the country that somehow I've just missed it on my journeys.
Yeah.
But one day, I'm sure I'll just end up going through there at some point anyway. But there's a lot of great crystals. As far as quartz, there are some really rare, amazing quartz that come out of there. There's a lot of mines. And that is a really cool thing. I like the fact that there's great crystals in Arkansas. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, one day. But that's neat that you're close enough to New Orleans, and that would be pretty cool.
Yeah. Definitely.
So, good night. Thank you for coming to hang out with us, and we hope to see you soon.
For sure. Yeah, thanks for staying up with us.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. Sleep well.
No, Princess. I was totally with you. Like, I'm sorry. It's probably terrible. All right, we'll see you soon, friend.
Yeah.
But it's still like the deep south, you know? Like, that's roughy. Well, that's like Midwest South. That's like a weird. Those are two areas that I'm like in the no-no zone. Midwest, the South, and then together Midwest, South. Like, but hey, whatever. To each their own.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's check out the top 10 abandoned mental asylums.
Okay. That sounds fun.
Okay.
There's just something about mental asylums that capture our attentions. Maybe it's their dark history, famous patients, or ghostly hauntings, or all of the above. As a result, it's the perfect location to film movies or shows, and the best spot if you want to go urban exploring or ghost hunting. So today, let's explore some of these asylums without actually having to go and visit the place. I'm not too keen on possession. Hey everyone, what's up and welcome back to Most Amazing Top 10. I'm your host, Lindsay Ivan, and today I'm bringing you the top 10 abandoned mental asylums. Starting off this countdown, we have Rolling Hills Asylum. Established in 1827, the Rolling Hills Asylum was originally a working farm that was converted into a home for the less fortunate. Then it went on to be a place for widows, orphans, alcoholics, criminals, and individuals with mental illnesses. But it closed its doors in 1974. Apparently, it's said that over 1,700 people died there. Hundreds are currently buried all over the property in unmarked graves, which makes this place very, very haunted. Visitors claim to have heard screaming and doors slamming. Others have seen the apparition of Roy Cruz, a 7.5-foot tall man who died there in 1942. And the hospital even has something known as a shadow hallway, a hallway where you can see tons of ghostly apparitions. Moving on to number 9, we have Topeka State Hospital. The Topeka State Hospital, located in Kansas, operated from 1872 to 1997. And this hospital, much like the others on this list, has quite a dark history. So apparently in the early 20th century, a reporter visited the facility and witnessed some terrifying things. He said that he saw a patient that had been strapped down for so long that his skin was growing over the restraints. And there were other patients that were chained up like animals. But a majority of them just sat in the hallways on a rocking chair, rocking back and forth, staring at the walls all day. That's something straight out of a horror film. In our 8th spot, we have the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum began operating in 1964 and was designed to only hold 250 patients. However, it was soon housing more than 2,400 patients, which was very problematic. The place was extremely overcrowded, and patients started to become more and more violent. Soon, they were starting fires and attacking the staff. In 1994, the asylum was forced to close due to a lot of violations. Now it's said that the building is haunted from the souls of the mistreated patients. In fact, the building is open to ghost tours if you want to go do some exploring. In our 7th spot, we have the Metropolitan State Hospital. Located in Massachusetts, this hospital opened in 1930 for patients with mental illnesses. But in 1980, something sinister happened that gave the hospital the nickname the Hospital of Seven Teeth. So, back in 1978, a patient named Anna Marie Davy went out for a walk on the grounds, but she never returned. In 1980, the patient Melvin Wilson came forward saying that he had killed her and buried her body parts all around the grounds. Not only that, he kept 7 of her teeth as souvenirs. Hence the nickname, the Hospital of Seven Teeth. But that's not the only bad thing to happen there. Years before this incident, in the 1960s, a bunch of patients were accidentally poisoned, but this has never been confirmed. In 1992, the hospital was closed after psychiatric care in Massachusetts became more privatized. In our 6th spot, we have Rancho Los Amigos. In 1888, Rancho Los Amigos, located close to downtown LA, was originally created to assist people living in poverty. Over time, the hospital expanded and was home to the elderly, homeless, and individuals with disabilities. But over the years, it ended up changing to become mainly a mental hospital. The hospital was in full operation until the 1950s, when it started to shut down its wards, including the mental hospital. That's when they discovered the hospital had a more dark past. In 2006, after the hospital was abandoned, a freezer was discovered in the morgue. Inside of it were mummified, amputated limbs, and brain tissue samples. Guess they didn't want to take that with them. But this makes you wonder what really went down in this hospital. The original building is now abandoned, but it has moved to another location and is now called Rancho Los Amigos National Rehabilitation Center. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Creedmoor Psychiatric Hospital. Back in 1912, this hospital opened up in Queens, New York for individuals that were said to be mentally ill. Most of the patients had psychosis or schizophrenia. It started off as a small institution with only 32 patients, but in 1959, it housed more than 7,000 patients. As a result, the hospital was very crowded and understaffed. In the 1970s, rumors spread like wildfire about murders, attacks, and suicides all happening in the hospital. In fact, it's said that one nurse hit a patient in a straitjacket across the throat with a club, which ended up crushing his throat, and as a result, he died from asphyxiation. Shortly after, the asylum was closed and left to rot. Making our way down the list, number 4, we have the Ganjiam Psychiatric Hospital. This next abandoned hospital is named one of the most haunted places in South Korea, and one of the freakiest places in the world. In fact, it's home to tons of urban legends. One legend states that the owner of the hospital was insane and kept the patients as his prisoners. Another version of the legend states that patients at the hospital started dying mysteriously, and that's what forced the hospital to close. In reality, the hospital closed in the 90s due to unsanitary conditions and lack of funding. Apparently, because of this, the owner left the country, leaving no documentation behind about this building, so it was just abandoned. But to this day, people are convinced that the hospital is haunted. In fact, thousands of people break into the hospital each year just for the chance to catch a ghost. In our 3rd spot, we have the Zelda Fitzgerald Sanatorium. Built in 1859, this sanatorium, once called Tioranda, was originally built for the Civil War officer General Joseph Howland. Then in 1915, it was converted into a psychiatric hospital. In 1934, novelist Scott Fitzgerald took his wife Zelda there with hopes to cure her schizophrenia. Hence why people now refer to it as the Zelda Fitzgerald Sanatorium. However, it is probably most known for housing the patient Frances Seymour, aka actress Jane Fonda's mother. Frances ended up taking her own life there after cutting her throat with a razor in 1942. In 1999, the hospital closed and, of course, is now said to be haunted. In our 2nd spot, we have Athens Lunatic Asylum. Yes, that's the actual name of this asylum. Located in Athens, Ohio, the asylum was built in 1874 for patients with tuberculosis. However, over the years, it became way too overcrowded and understaffed. As a result, patients were being mistreated. Over the years, the hospital turned into a place for the mentally ill. This is when the man, Dr. Walter Jackson, comes into play. Dr. Jackson loved transorbital lobotomies. He believed that it could cure all mental illnesses. So at this hospital, he performed 200 lobotomies. I'm telling you right now that many did not go so well. But that's not the only freaky thing to happen there. A patient known as Margaret Schilling went missing while in the ward. A month later, her body was found locked in a room in an abandoned section of a ward. In fact, her decaying body left a nasty stain on the ward's floor.
Wow.
That can still be seen today. And in our number one spot, we have Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Located in Kentucky, this hospital was originally built in 1910 as a hospital for patients with tuberculosis. Sadly, tons of patients ended up dying from the disease. The hospital did more harm than good. Rumor goes that the hospital was mistreating their patients and conducting experiments on them. In fact, they had an area in the hospital called the death tunnel or body chute, where they would dump the deceased. It's also said that one nurse hung herself in room 502, and in that same room, another nurse died from falling out of the window. The hospital closed in 1961 upon the discovery of an antibiotic that could treat and cure tuberculosis. As a result, there was no need for the hospital. Now it's said that it's an extremely haunted building. Apparently, people have seen tons of apparitions there. The most famous one being of a boy named Timmy, who likes to play with rubber balls. He also likes to run from room to room. It's said that if you roll a small ball down a hallway, then Timmy will roll it back to you. Also, why are all ghosts either named like Timmy or Tommy? That's what I need to know. And that's all for today's video. Let's move on to our comment shout-out portion. I'll be shouting out comments. I'm not Hey everyone, what?
Sorry, pause on it. Cool. Well, that was some neat spots.
That was some neat spots.
That were creepy and abandoned.
The one had a body chute. Band name.
Body chute.
Body chute.
And yeah, and the chick that got locked in.
Yeah.
And was missing for a month.
And then
stained the floor forever. Ooh, that's pretty crazy.
Seems like they would have buffed that out. I guess if it was an abandoned area, nobody's going into it.
Yeah.
They're like, whatever.
No, that's interesting.
Just lock that door again.
Yeah, that's some cool spooky spots.
Yeah.
I dig it.
Yeah.
I dig it. I think that was a pretty good episode. Normally we go a little bit longer, but I have something important to do tonight. It is the last night that Yenwar is open, and my last shift was yesterday, and I'm going to be heading down there for the last couple hours. So I'm there for the very, very end. So I'm gonna call it a little bit on the early side today.
Okay.
And then next week we will resume as usual tradition.
Yep. We'll resume something.
We will.
We don't even know what it's gonna be.
Like a motherfucker. You don't even know.
It's top secret. We're not telling anyone anyway.
Yes. Just kidding. It's Weird News on Monday. Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. I hope that everybody enjoyed our stories, the history, the dark history of the Asylums.
Very dark. Super dark.
It was. It was really fucked up.
Pretty gnarly.
But yeah, Princess, it will mean a lot. I couldn't think about just not going at all. I had to make sure to at least go and be there for what I'm calling the official mic drop, like end of the night, the end of the era. So it'll be good. So thank you. Also, I want to say thank you, Princess. Thank you for sending me a sweet message yesterday and checking in on me and seeing how I was doing about all that and sending me some love and support. I really, truly appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. You are a good friend.
That was nice.
It's very sweet.
How nice.
I know. So yeah, so we'll wrap it up, and then I'll do that, and then we'll see you guys on Monday then. Thank you, Princess. Thank you for being here from beginning to end. We appreciate you always and forever. Definitely. And any of the lurkers, we love you guys too.
Yep. Love to the lurkers. Lurker love.
Yes.
Lurker love.
All right. Well, we will talk to you guys later, okay? Mwah. Have sweet dreams that do not involve lobotomies. Try.
Fair enough. Bye, everyone.
All right. Good night.